The syringe was already in his hand before Claire even turned around. She had her back to the door, checking vitals, writing numbers down, doing what nurses do at 1 in the morning when a floor is quiet, and the only sound is the soft mechanical rhythm of a ventilator. She hadn't heard him come in, hadn't heard the door, hadn't heard anything at all until she registered the shift in the air, that specific wrongness of someone standing close behind you who was not supposed to be there. When she turned, the man in the white coat was already moving toward the IV line. His face was calm. That was what stopped her breath first, not the syringe, but the calm. The total, deliberate calm of a man who had done this before and expected to do it again before morning. Her patient lay motionless in the bed between them. Brain dead, the chart said. Already gone, the neurologist said. But Claire Whitmore had been sitting beside this man for 4 hours, and something in her would not accept that. Something in her kept watching his chest rise and fall with a steadiness that didn't match the verdict. She put herself between the stranger and the IV line. "Who are you?" The calm broke. He lunged. If you've ever found yourself standing between a dying stranger and the person trying to finish the job, if you've ever had to choose in a single heartbeat between stepping back and holding your ground, then you already know what Claire felt in that moment. And if you haven't, ask yourself honestly, what would you do? Subscribe to this channel and follow this story all the way to the end, because what happens next will stay with you. Hit the like button and drop your city and country in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain had been falling since 6 o'clock. Claire Whitmore noticed it, the way she noticed most things at the end of a double shift distantly, the way you notice a song playing in another room when you're too tired to identify it. She was standing at the nurse's station on the 7th floor of Meridian Private Hospital, trying to get the charge nurse to sign off on her overtime hours before the system locked her out for the night. Her feet hurt. Her back hurt worse. She had been awake for 19 hours, and she still had 8 more to go. "Suite 4205, said the charge nurse, a compact woman named Phyllis, who never wasted words after midnight. She slid a chart across the counter without looking up. "Long-term monitoring, neuro case. You're primary for the shift." Claire picked up the chart. "Read the name. Read the diagnosis. Brain death protocol? Observed, not confirmed. Families disputing the findings. Somebody upstairs wants around-the-clock eyes on him until the ethics committee meets on Thursday." Phyllis finally looked up. "You'll be fine. He's not going anywhere." Claire looked at the room number again. Suite 4205 was on the 42nd floor, the hospital's VIP tower, where the rooms cost more per night than Claire made in a week. She had floated up there twice before in 3 years. Once for a city councilman after a stroke, and once for a hedge fund manager's wife who had overdosed on something she wasn't prescribed. She took the chart, took the elevator, did not ask questions because nurses, who ask questions at 1 in the morning, tend to get assigned worse things than monitoring a brain-dead patient in a luxury suite. The 42nd floor had a different quality than the rest of the hospital. Quieter, warmer. The lighting was softer. The carpet in the corridors was real carpet, not linoleum, and it absorbed sound in a way that made the whole wing feel slightly unreal, like a hotel that had decided to install ventilators. Outside room 4205, a man was sitting in a chair. He was large. Not just tall constructed, the way people get when they have spent serious decades in serious gyms or in environments where being physically formidable is a professional requirement. He wore dark clothing and had his arms folded across his chest. His eyes tracked Claire before she was halfway down the corridor. She stopped in front of him, with the chart under her arm. "I'm the night nurse for this room." He looked at her for a moment without speaking. Then he looked down the corridor in both directions, looked back at her, and stood up. Badge. She showed him her ID. He studied it the way someone studies a document they actually intend to remember, not the way people glance at badges to be polite. Then he knocked twice on the door, opened it just wide enough to speak through, and said something low that she couldn't catch. A woman's voice answered. He pushed the door open and stepped aside. The room was large by hospital standards, which meant it was small by the standards of whoever was paying for it. A hospital bed dominated the center, surrounded by monitors. Floor-to-ceiling windows on the far side showed Manhattan spread below, lights in every direction. Wet and fractured by the rain, the city's looking exactly like itself even at this hour, which was the thing Claire had always found both exhausting and oddly comforting about New York. It never stopped, even when everything else did. A woman stood at the window with her arms crossed, looking out. She turned when Claire entered. Late 40s, expensive clothes, worn the way people wear them when they haven't thought about what they put on, because thinking about clothes is not their primary problem. Dark hair, eyes that measured everything they landed on, the kind of face that had once been striking, and was now something more complicated, hard in some places, scored by fatigue in others, held together by what looked like pure determination. "You're the night nurse." Claire Whitmore. "Yes." Vivian Alderidge. The woman did not move from the window. His sister. She tilted her head toward the bed. "I want to be contacted immediately if anything changes. Anything. His breathing, his color, his monitors. I don't care what time it is. Of course. If any physician comes into this room tonight, any physician at all, regardless of what they say or who sent them, you don't let them touch him until I've been called. You understand?" Claire understood that something was off. Not in the obvious way, not the way that set off immediate alarms, but in the quieter way she had learned to recognize over 7 years of nursing, where the situation in front of you doesn't quite fit the shape of its official explanation. Brain death monitoring didn't usually come with a guard at the door and a sister issuing instructions about unauthorized physicians. "I understand," Claire said. Vivian looked at her for one more moment, really looked, the kind of look that was an assessment rather than a greeting, and then gathered her coat from the chair beside the bed. "His name is Roman," she said. "He's 42. He was in a car accident 6 days ago." "I've read the chart," Vivian said. "Doesn't tell you everything." She paused at the door. "Don't let anyone in." Then she was gone. The large man outside Grant, Claire would learn later, pulled the door closed behind her, and Claire was alone with Roman Alderidge. She stood beside the bed and looked at him. He was, she thought, not what she had expected. She was not sure what she had expected from a man whose chart described profound neurological suppression and whose family could apparently afford an entire floor of Manhattan's most expensive private hospital. But the face on the pillow was not it. He looked, for lack of a better word, unfinished. Like someone had interrupted him mid-sentence. Late 40s in the chart, but the face read younger in some ways, and older in others, jaw sharp even in unconsciousness, a long-healed scar above one eyebrow, 2 days of dark growth on his face, because nobody had shaved him or nobody had wanted to. Strong hands. A bruise still yellowing along the left side of his face from the crash. He was breathing. That was what she kept coming back to. He was breathing with a steadiness that the monitors confirmed, and she had seen brain death presentations before, had monitored them during her ICU rotation years ago, and this did not look like that. Not exactly. She charted his vitals, adjusted the monitoring cuffs, checked the IV line, the placement, the flow rate. She did the work methodically because that was how she got through long shifts, one task at a time. Don't let the weight of the whole thing sit on you at once. Just the next task, and then the next. When the work was done, she pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat. Outside, the rain intensified against the windows. Manhattan swam below in moving light. She sat with him for a while in the quiet. And then, because she was exhausted, because she had been awake for 19 hours, because sometimes the only way to survive a long night shift is to talk to the nearest available person, even when that person cannot talk. Back, she started talking. Not about him, about herself. "I had a patient last week," she said, not loudly, the way you'd speak in a library, who coded 3 times in 4 hours and came back all 3 times. "And I thought at some point that has to mean something, like the universe is making an argument." She looked at the monitors. "I'm not sure what the argument is, but it keeps making it." Roman did not respond. His chest rose and fell. Claire shifted in the chair. "My dad's sick," she said. "Has been for about 2 years. It's his kidneys, and the treatment is expensive in the way that healthcare is expensive when your insurance decides that what you need is in a gray zone. So, we pay out of pocket for the parts that matter most, and my mom cuts everything else, and I work extra shifts." She looked down at her hands. "I'm not telling you this because I want sympathy. It's a long night, and you're the only one here. The rain against the glass. The soft, consistent sound of the ventilator." She talked for a while about nursing school, about how she had originally wanted to be a veterinarian before the cost became impossible. About the specific quality of loneliness that comes from working nights in a city that always looks busy from a distance, but feels empty when you're actually inside it at 3 in the morning. She talked about small things. The coffee from the 7th floor machine that tasted like burned paper. The fact that she had been wearing the same pair of shoes for 2 years, because she hadn't had a week where replacing them made sense financially. She was not performing. That was the thing. She was just filling the silence, the way people do when they're too tired for pretense. At some point she reached over and rested her hand on top of his. It was not a romantic gesture. It was the same instinct that made her straighten blankets and adjust pillows, the nurse's baseline reflex to offer contact when nothing else is available. "You're not gone yet," she said quietly. "I don't know why I keep thinking that, but I don't think you're gone." She sat back. The monitors hummed. Shortly after 1 in the morning, the door opened. Claire looked up. A man in a white coat came in with a tablet under one arm and walked directly toward the IV stand with the efficiency of someone who belonged there. He had a hospital ID badge clipped to his lapel. He was already reaching for Roman's IV line. The ID badge was wrong. Claire was on her feet before she had consciously decided to stand. The badge was wrong not visually, but in terms of which department it listed. Neurology attending physicians at Meridian used a specific badge format. The laminate color was different. She had seen it every shift for 3 years, and the difference was small. The kind of small that you would miss if you weren't paying attention. If you weren't standing 4 feet away in good light with nothing else to look at. "Stop." The man looked at her. "What are you adjusting?" she said. "Sedation titration." His voice was even, completely even. "Ordered by Dr. Marsh. He's not receiving sedation." A pause. "Brief but real. Who are you?" she said. The calm left his face. He moved faster than she expected. One step, his hand coming up with a syringe she hadn't seen him draw from his coat pocket. And Claire did 2 things simultaneously that she had not planned. She stepped backward into the IV stand with her full weight, sending it clattering sideways across the floor, and she screamed. Not a frightened scream. A loud operational scream, the kind that carries through walls. The door came open so fast, she felt the air pressure change. Grant crossed the room in 3 steps. What happened next was brief and violent, and Claire looked away from most of it. When it was over, the man in the white coat was face down on the floor, with Grant's knee in the center of his back, and the syringe had rolled under the bed. Claire was shaking. She pressed her back against the wall beside the window and focused on breathing until her hands stopped. She called Vivian. She called security. Then she crossed the room and picked up the syringe with a gloved hand, held it under the bedside light. The label read potassium chloride. The dosage was not a therapeutic dosage. There was nothing therapeutic about it. She set it down carefully and looked at Roman. If she had not turned around, if she had been in the bathroom, or charting at the desk with her back to the door, or if she had been the kind of nurse who didn't look closely at badges because she was tired and it was late and it had been a long shift. Detective Miles Carver arrived 40 minutes later, which was fast for Manhattan at 2 in the morning, and the speed of it told Claire something even before he opened his mouth. He was a compact man with gray at his temples and the practiced unhurriedness of someone who had been to too many crime scenes to hurry at any of them anymore. He took Claire's statement in the corridor, while paramedics attended to the restrained man inside. He was going to inject potassium chloride directly into the IV, Claire said. She had said it twice already, to security and to the first officer who arrived, but she said it again because it was the kind of thing you kept saying until it felt real. At that concentration, it would have caused cardiac arrest in under a minute. It would have read as organ failure on a brain death case. Nobody would have questioned it, Carver said. Not a question. No. Nobody would have questioned it. He wrote something in his notebook. Then he looked at her directly. "Ms. Whitmore, I need to tell you some things about the man in that room." She had already suspected some of it. Not the specifics she was a nurse, not a crime reporter, but the shape of it. The bodyguard at the door. Vivian's instructions about physicians. The speed with which Carver had arrived. The way everyone who had come near this room operated like they were managing something larger than a family's grief over a brain-damaged relative. Carver told her about Roman Alderidge. He told her carefully, the way experienced detectives tell civilians things, giving them enough to understand the danger without giving them enough to become a liability. Roman was not a legitimate businessman who happened to have enemies. He was the primary controlling figure behind a criminal organization that had spent the last decade consolidating significant portions of New York's underworld, moving through legitimate shipping and construction and real estate the way money always moves when it needs somewhere clean to go, but rooted in something that was very much not clean. The Alderidge organization had been in a sustained low-grade war with a rival family called the Calderones for 3 years. The car crash 6 days ago had not been a car crash. The man you stopped tonight, Carver said, gave us a name before the lawyers got to him. He works for the Calderones. They paid a physician inside this hospital to sign off on the brain death determination. Roman was never brain dead, Ms. Whitmore. Someone suppressed his neurological function with a compound that mimics coma while leaving certain baseline functions intact, then had a doctor certify him as gone while the family was too overwhelmed to question it. Tonight was supposed to be the last step. He goes into apparent organ failure. Case closed. Claire stood in the corridor with her arms crossed and listened to this and felt the specific kind of nausea that is not physical, the kind that comes from understanding something you would have preferred not to understand. He's been lying there for 6 days, she said. Conscious in there somewhere? We don't know. Possibly. The neurologist we trust is assessing him now. She looked at the closed door of room 4205. And they know. I stopped it. Yes. So they know my name. Carver met her eyes. He didn't soften it. Yes, they do. He told her about police protection options. He used careful language and the tone of a man who genuinely wanted to help, but also genuinely understood that the help he could offer had limits. She listened. She nodded in the right places. When he finished, she thanked him and went back into the room. Grant looked at her when she came in, just looked, with the kind of expression that contained a question he wasn't going to voice. She ignored it and went to the chair beside the bed and sat down. The room had been straightened. The IV stand was upright. The syringe was in evidence packaging somewhere. Roman lay exactly as he had lain before, except now the door had 2 officers outside it and the situation had been labeled definitively as what it actually was. Claire looked at his hands. She thought about what Carver had said. About 6 days of lying there while the world arranged his death around him. About a physician signing a document that said he was already gone. About the particular loneliness of being trapped in your own body while someone argued over whether to let you die or help it along. She had spent 4 hours talking to him about her father's kidneys and the coffee machine on the 7th floor. She reached over and took his hand. If they come again, she said, they'll have to come through me. She was not being heroic. She was being honest, which was different. She was a woman who had just spent her night shift, discovering that her patient was alive inside, a diagnosis designed to bury him, and the thing she felt in response was not fear. It was fear. She was not stupid, but underneath the fear was something older and more durable. She had not become a nurse because it was a safe career. She had become one because she could not stand watching preventable harm occur and do nothing. This was preventable harm. She would do something. Outside, the rain was beginning to slow. The monitors around Roman continued their steady, rhythmic documentation numbers ticking upward and downward in the normal ranges, his lungs doing what lungs do when someone hasn't given up on them yet. Claire rested her head against the side of the chair and closed her eyes, just for a moment, which was the kind of thing you told yourself was not sleeping, even when it was. She did not dream. She was too tired to dream. At 5:46 in the morning, with the first gray swings of day beginning to appear at the edges of the Manhattan skyline, Claire was half asleep in the chair when she felt something. A pressure against her palm. Faint, unsteady, but deliberate. She opened her eyes. Monitors were still reading normal ranges, but something in the room had changed. A quality of the air, a difference in the sound of the ventilator, something she couldn't name precisely, but that her body registered before her mind caught up. She looked at their joined hands. Roman's fingers had curled slightly around hers. It might have been involuntary. Reflex. Spasm. She knew all the explanations that the rational part of her training would immediately produce. She sat with those explanations for exactly 3 seconds. Then his heart rate rose. Not dramatically. Not the sudden spike of a code. Not anything that would trigger alarms. Just a slow, purposeful increase, 4 beats above his baseline, then 6, then settling at 8 higher than where it had been all night. His chest rose. Then it rose again, slightly differently, slightly more, with a small variance in the rhythm that meant something. That meant, specifically, that the mechanism doing the breathing was not only the ventilator. Roman Alderidge took a breath of his own. It was small. It was ragged. It would not have convinced any physician in the world that the man was recovering. But Claire had watched 400 patients breathe over 7 years, and she recognized the difference between a body that was being ventilated and a body that was beginning to breathe for itself. And that difference was everything. She pressed the call button. She pressed it twice, which was the code for, "Come now," not "come when you have time." And then she looked at Roman's face, and she waited, and across the Manhattan skyline, the first light of morning pushed through the clouds like something that had been trying for a long time to get through, and finally had. The first person through the door was not a doctor. It was Vivian. She came in at a near run, coat still on, hair not right, which told Claire she had not been home, had been somewhere close, waiting, the way people wait when they know a situation is not stable enough to sleep through. She stopped at the foot of the bed and looked at the monitors, and then at her brother's face, and the expression that crossed her own face was one Claire recognized from years of delivering impossible news, the look of someone who had already prepared themselves for the worst, and now did not know what to do with something else. "What happened?" Vivian said. Not a question. A demand for sequence. His heart rate elevated on its own. "Approximately 12 minutes ago," Claire said, "there was a change in respiratory effort. He initiated a breath independent of the ventilator. It was brief, but it was real." Vivian's eyes moved to Roman's hand, to the slight curl of his fingers around Claire's. "He moved his hand?" "Yes." Vivian sat down in the nearest chair, with the abruptness of someone whose legs have simply decided they are finished holding the weight. She put both hands over her mouth and stayed that way for a long moment. The neurologist arrived. 8 minutes. Later, Dr. Anita Seo, small and deliberate, who walked in with the specific energy of a person who was already recalibrating everything she thought she knew about the patient in this room. She did not apologize for her speed or her disheveled state. She went directly to Roman, began her assessment, and did not speak for 4 minutes. Claire stood by the window and watched. Seo checked pupillary response. Left eye minimal constriction, but constriction. Right eye same, slightly more pronounced. She ran a reflex test along Roman's sternum that Claire knew was designed to provoke, and Roman's jaw tightened. Fractionally, but it tightened. Seo straightened up. "Who declared this man brain dead?" she said, and her voice was flat, in the way that clinical voices go flat when they are covering something much larger. "Dr. Halverson," Vivian said from the chair. 3 days ago. "Halverson is not on call tonight." "No. Who authorized his access to this floor?" Nobody answered. The silence in the room had a particular quality, the quality of a question that everyone present already understood was larger than it appeared, that pulled something dark up behind it when you looked at it directly. Seo looked at Claire. "You noticed the change, yes? You were with him the entire shift." "From midnight." Seo wrote something. Looked at the monitors again. Looked at Roman. "His neurological functions have not been absent," she said carefully. "They've been suppressed. There is a meaningful difference. Whoever assessed him as brain dead either made an error I find very difficult to defend, or they did not make an error at all." The room absorbed that. Vivian's hands came down from her mouth slowly. "Say that again," she said. "The presentation is consistent with profound pharmacological suppression of neurological activity, not with irreversible neurological failure." Seo's voice did not waver. He was not brain dead. He was made to appear brain dead. The sound Vivian made was not a cry. It was something shorter and harder than that, something that came from a place beyond grief, from the territory past it where grief becomes something combustible. "I want Halverson found," she said. "Tonight, that's not my department," Seo said. "No," Vivian said. "It's mine." Grant, who had been standing at the door through all of this, shifted his weight. Claire watched him do it. There was nothing subtle about the movement. It was the movement of a man receiving an order through a look, which was how people like Grant and people like Vivian communicated when they did not want specific said out loud. Claire noticed. She filed it. She was very good at filing things. By 7 in the morning, the floor had the controlled chaos of a situation that multiple entities with competing interests were all trying to manage simultaneously. 2 more police officers had arrived. A hospital administrator appeared briefly and then disappeared again when it became clear nobody was interested in his perspective on liability. Detective Carver came back with a second detective Claire hadn't met, and they spoke with Vivian in the Corfortwittifer for 20 minutes while Claire stayed inside with Roman and Co ran more assessments. At 7:34, Roman's eyes opened. Not fully, not in any cinematic way. His left eye opened approximately halfway, and then closed, and then both eyes opened to slits, and the light from the window hit him. He turned his head slowly with visible effort, like moving through something thicker than air, away from the window. Roman Co's voice was precise and level. "Roman, can you hear me?" His mouth moved. Nothing audible came out. The ventilator was still doing partial work, and he was still fighting against the residual suppressive compound in his system, and the effort of basic vocalization was clearly enormous. But his mouth moved with intent, not the random motion of a reflexive system cycling through patterns, but the specific, shaped intent of someone trying to form a word. Co looked at Claire. Claire stepped closer to the bed. She was not sure why. Professional instinct, maybe, or the fact that she had spent the night talking to him, and some irrational part of her felt that made her more readable to him than the others. She leaned slightly closer to the bed rail. Roman's eyes at slits moved to her. They stayed there. Not randomly, not with the unfocused drift of recovering sedation. They found her face and stayed. "Hey," Claire said quietly. It was a stupid thing to say. She said it anyway. His right hand moved, the same hand she had been holding. He turned it palm upward on the blanket. Claire looked at Co. Co made a small gesture with her head that meant what she knew it meant. Claire put her hand in his. The grip was weak, barely there. The grip of someone working with 10% of their normal strength, but it was a grip. Deliberate pressure. His fingers closed around hers, and his chest rose, with what was unmistakably a different kind of breath than the mechanical ones. Deeper his, Vivian, standing at the foot of the bed, pressed the back of her hand to her mouth. Grant looked at the wall. The monitors registered the changes in real-time heart rate, climbing to a sustained new baseline, respiratory drive increasing, the ventilator's contribution to each breath decreasing measurably. Roman Alderidge was coming back. Not all at once, not cleanly, but unmistakably. The morning moved in pieces after that. Co ordered blood work for compound analysis. Carver ordered a formal security detail on the floor. Vivian made phone calls in the corridor that Claire was not close enough to hear, but could read by posture alone the tight-shouldered, low-voiced calls of someone issuing directions to people accustomed to receiving them. By 9, Roman had been extubated his respiratory drive, strong enough to sustain him independently, which Co characterized as remarkable. And Claire characterized as something she had known since 2 in the morning, even when she hadn't had the clinical evidence to back it up. By 10, he could speak. Barely. His voice was rough and strained, and he used it sparingly, the way you use something you're not sure will hold. But he used it. The first thing Roman Alderidge said to Claire Whitmore was not romantic. It was not profound. It was delivered at roughly 20% of a normal speaking volume, interrupted by 2 long pauses. And it was this: "Your father, kidney disease." She stared at him. "You heard that." He looked at her steadily. His eyes were clearer than they should have been, given everything. Darker than she'd expected. Somehow, though she couldn't have said why she'd formed any expectation at all. "I heard," he said, sort of it. Another pause. Effortful. "Not all. In and out. How much is in and out?" "Enough." His eyes moved to the window, and something in his expression changed, not softened exactly, but shifted like a calculation being revised. "You talked about your shoes." Claire thought about the 2-year-old sneakers she'd mentioned to a supposedly unconscious man at 2 in the morning, and felt something between embarrassment and something she couldn't name yet. "I didn't think you were listening." "I wasn't supposed to be anywhere," Roman said. "I was listening anyway." Carver came in at 10:40. He sat across from Roman with his notebook and the careful patience of a man who understood that the person he was interviewing had been through something that most people did not survive, and who also understood that the person he was interviewing was not someone who would appreciate sympathy being confused with softness. He asked questions. Roman answered them, slowly, in the abbreviated way of someone measuring each word against the energy it cost. Yes, he had suspected the accident was not an accident. No, he had not been able to communicate anything from inside the suppressed state. Yes, he had been aware intermittently, incompletely of people in the room. Voices. Presence. No, he would not be discussing the specifics of his organization with a detective without attorneys present. Carver did not push on that last point. What he did say before he stood to leave was this: "You understand that the people who tried to finish this tonight will know it didn't work." "I understand," Roman said, "and Ms. Whitmore is now connected to that failed attempt. By name, by face, by the fact that she's been in this room." Roman's eyes moved to Claire, who was standing near the door. Something happened in his expression. Something that had the shape of guilt, though Claire suspected it was not a look Roman Alderidge produced easily or often. "I know," he said, set. "I'm telling you both," Carver said, "so that both of you understand the situation clearly." He left. Roman looked at Claire for a long time. "You should go," he said finally. "I'm still on shift for another 3 hours. After your shift." "And go where?" She said it evenly, not combatively. An actual question. He did not have an answer for that, which seemed to frustrate him. She could see it, the specific frustration of a man accustomed to having answers, accustomed to being the one who resolved situations, confronted with a situation he had not created and could not currently resolve. "I have people who can—" "I'm not asking your people for anything," Claire said. "I don't know your people, Vivian." "I don't know Vivian either. I met her at midnight." She crossed her arms. "I appreciate that you're worried. I think that's probably new for you. Worrying about someone outside your immediate situation, and I'm not being cruel about that. I'm just noticing it. But I'm not going to make decisions about my safety based on a conversation we're having while you're still on the back end of pharmacological coma." He looked at her. "That's a reasonable position," said slowly. "Thank you. It won't protect you, I know." She met his eyes. "I'll figure it out." She left when her shift ended at noon. A sound like green wood splitting. She took the subway home because she always took the subway home, because the cab fare from Midtown to her apartment in Washington Heights was money she didn't have in her regular budget, and she was too tired to recompute her budget right now. She stood on the platform. She stood on the platform with her bag over one shoulder and her eyes on the far end of the tunnel where the train would appear, and she thought about everything Carver had told her. A sound like green wood splitting, and she thought about Roman's voice saying she had talked about her shoes, and she thought about the syringe of potassium chloride that had been 12 inches from a man's IV line. She was not panicking. She had moved past panic somewhere around 4 in the morning and into the specific state of alertness that comes after panic, the one that is simultaneously clearer and more brittle. Her apartment was on the 4th floor of a building that had a buzzer that sometimes worked. She took the stairs because the elevator had been unreliable for 6 months, and the super had given up pretending otherwise. 4th floor, apartment 4C, 2 rooms and a bathroom and a kitchen that was really just the end of the living room with appliances at it. She unlocked the door. She knew before she pushed it open. The deadbolt had been relocked. Whoever it was, they were professional. They hadn't left it obviously unsecured, but the door had a resistance when she opened it that was different from normal, a different weight to the air behind it, and Claire stood in the doorway for a moment without going in. Then she went in. The apartment looked untouched. That was the first thing. Nothing overturned, nothing ransacked, nothing that would have read as a burglary to anyone looking quickly. Whoever had been here had been neat, which was somehow worse than mess would have been, because it meant they were methodical. It meant they took their time. She checked the bedroom, the bathroom, the kitchen. Then she saw the kitchen counter. A single dried black rose, stem stripped of its leaves, laid across the counter beside her coffee maker. No note, no message of any kind. None was needed. Claire stood in her kitchen and looked at the black rose, Brakel, and understood exactly what it was, had heard Carver mention the Calderones' symbolism in his briefing that morning, had absorbed it with the rest of the information, without knowing she would need it this quickly. "You're next." That was what it said. That was all it said. She picked up her phone and called Carver. He answered on the second ring. "Someone's been in my apartment," she said. "They left a black rose on the counter." A pause. "Are you inside right now?" "Yes." "Get out. Right now. Don't touch anything else. I'll have a unit there in 8 minutes." She was outside on the sidewalk in under 90 seconds. Bag still on her shoulder, The specific unreality of standing outside your own home because someone dangerous has made it unsafe, settling over her like weather. The Washington Heights street around her was conducting its normal Saturday afternoon business. Bodegas, strollers, a group of teenagers sitting on a stoop, arguing about something, and none of it touched her. She stood in the middle of all of it and felt entirely separate from it. Her phone rang. Vivian. "Detective Carver contacted me," Vivian said. She sounded exactly as she had sounded at midnight, which was composed and direct. But now there was something underneath it that hadn't been there before. Something tighter. "Are you all right?" "I'm standing on the sidewalk outside my building. I need you to listen to me. I need you to not make any decisions in the next 10 minutes that you can't reverse. Can you do that?" Claire watched a pigeon land on the bodega awning across the street and decide almost immediately that it had made a mistake. "I'm listening," she said. Vivian gave her 3 options. The first was formal police protection, a detail, relocated safe house, coordinated through Carver and the department. Vivian described it honestly, viable for days, possibly weeks, but dependent on institutional resources that had limits and bureaucratic timelines that didn't match criminal timelines. The second was disappearance. New identity, new location, people Vivian knew who handled exactly this kind of transition. Clean, effective, permanent. You leave New York and you don't come back, and your old name becomes a person you used to be. The third option, Vivian presented more carefully. Roman's residence in the West Village was, Vivian said, the most secured private address in New York City outside of federal facilities. Not because of the address or the building. Those were unremarkable on the surface, but because of what was inside and around it. Staff, systems. Grant and the people Grant trusted. It was, she said, the one place in the city where the Calderones would need to escalate to enact open war to touch someone. An open war had costs they were not currently positioned to absorb. "You're inviting me to move into your brother's house," Claire said. "I am. We met at midnight, I know. He was unconscious for that entire meeting." "I'm aware, Vivian." Claire pressed her fingers against her eyes. "This is not a normal offer." "No," Vivian agreed. "It isn't. Nothing about today has been normal, and the people who put a rose on your kitchen counter are not operating inside normal parameters either. I'm not asking you to trust us entirely. I'm asking you to make a practical decision about the next 72 hours. Claire thought about her parents. Her father, dialysis 3 times a week. Her mother driving him in the car. Claire helped pay to keep running. She thought about what a black rose on a kitchen counter implied about people who knew where she lived, and therefore knew where her parents lived. "My family," she said. "My parents," a pause. "Already handled," Vivian said quietly. "What does that mean?" "It means they are no longer at their home address. It means they are somewhere comfortable and secure, and your mother has been told it is a precautionary measure connected to something at the hospital." Another pause. "I moved them an hour ago. I should have told you immediately. I'm telling you now." The mix of emotions that moved through Claire in the following seconds was complicated enough that she couldn't have untangled it quickly. Relief, fury at not being consulted, gratitude she didn't want to feel, and underneath all of it, something that recognized, with the cold clarity that sometimes arrived when she was pushed past the point of pretending that Vivian had done the right thing, even if the process was wrong. "You moved my parents without asking me," Claire said. "Yes." "Without telling me." "Yes." "Why?" "Because I knew you would say you needed to think about it." Vivian's voice was level. "And I didn't have time to wait for you to think about it." Claire looked at the street. Somewhere in this city, her father was in a different building than the one she'd left him in yesterday. Somewhere in this cities, a man she had spoken to for one night through the bars of a hospital bed rail had just told her she had been his only tether back to consciousness. And somewhere, someone had walked into her apartment and laid a black rose on her counter with the patience of people who were not in a hurry because they were certain of the outcome. "I'm not agreeing to anything yet," Claire said. "I know. I have questions. You can ask them when you get here." She didn't agree immediately. She made Carver confirm that her parents had been located and were secure before she agreed to anything. She insisted on speaking to her mother directly. A brief call in which her mother complained about having been asked to leave with only 2 hours' notice, and said the place she was in was perfectly nice but small, and had she remembered to water the plant on the windowsill, the small cactus, because it didn't need much, but it needed something. Claire said she would figure out the cactus. Her mother said she sounded tired. "I'm okay, Mom." "You sound tired," her mother said again, because that was what her mother did, which was to say the accurate thing twice as if the second repetition might land differently. She took a car Vivian sent. Not a flashy car, a dark, ordinary car, driven by a man who introduced himself as Danny and said nothing else for the entire ride, which was either professionalism or personality, and Claire was too tired to determine which. The West Village building was not what she'd expected, which was probably the point. No gates. No obvious guards at the entrance. A brownstone that looked like every other brownstone on the block, except for the quality of the locks, and the fact that when the elevator opened onto the top floor, Grant was standing there, looking like a man who had been standing in rooms being professionally large his entire life and intended to continue doing so. He looked at her. She looked back. "You could try saying hello," she said. Something shifted in his face, nearly imperceptible. She had the strong impression it was not something that happened often. "Hello," he said, better. The apartment was large. She noticed it in pieces the way you notice spaces when you're too overwhelmed to take them in whole high ceilings. Windows that looked south toward the river. Furniture that was expensive without performing expensiveness. Books which surprised her. Not decorative books arranged by spine color, but books that had been read, left at angles on surfaces, a few open face down on the coffee table. Vivian was at the kitchen counter. Roman was not there. "He's resting," Vivian said before Claire could ask. CO wanted him transported here, rather than kept at the hospital. Quieter, more controllable. She looked at Claire with the look she had been using since midnight, the one that assessed and calculated simultaneously. "Do you want to eat something?" "I want to understand what I'm doing here." "You're safe here." That's a description of where I am, not an explanation of what I'm doing. Vivian set down the coffee cup she'd been holding. "Sit down," she said. "I've been sitting down all—" Claire. Vivian said her name with a precision that stopped her. "Sit down." She sat. Vivian sat across from her and folded her hands on the table and said, "Roman wants to speak with you. When he's rested. Tonight, probably." She paused. "He doesn't usually ask to speak with people. He usually decides things, and speaking with people is the mechanism of communicating those decisions. What he's doing right now is different." Claire waited. "He remembers everything you said to him," Vivian continued. "All of it. The specifics. He woke up in a hospital room, knowing a woman named Claire Whitmore had sat beside him all night and told him things she probably hadn't told anyone recently. And he also woke up knowing that same woman had put herself between him and a syringe of potassium chloride." She looked directly at Claire. "For Roman, those are not small facts. For any person, those wouldn't be small facts." "Yes," Vivian said, "but most people don't have the resources or the particular kind of guilt that makes them want to immediately fix what the small facts mean." Claire absorbed this. "He's going to offer me something," she said. "He's going to want to do something. What form it takes, that depends on the conversation." Vivian's expression shifted slightly. "I'm not asking you to like him. I'm not asking you to trust him further than the evidence supports. I'm asking you to give him the conversation." Because the sound came from down the hallway. Both women stopped. It was not dramatic, not a crash, not a fall. It was the sound of someone moving through a space with insufficient steadiness, the soft multiple contacts of a person using a wall for support rather than choosing to. Claire was on her feet before Vivian was. She went down the hallway faster than she'd meant to and found Roman 6 feet from the bedroom door, upright but barely, one hand against the wall and the other, not sure where to be. He was in a hospital shirt that someone had traded for a gray t-shirt at some point, and he was pale in the way that people are pale after serious physical systems failures. And the effort on his face was of someone who had told his body to do something, and his body had agreed to do it, but was making clear it considered the terms unreasonable. He looked at her. "I was coming to find you," he said. His voice was still rough, still not all the way back. "You could have waited," Claire said, and her voice came out more firmly than she'd intended. "You were told to rest. I've been horizontal for 6 days. You were unconscious for 6 days, which is different." She was already assessing him the way she always assessed patients, automatically, involuntarily, the way you can't stop parsing information that your training has made you fluent in. His color was poor but not alarming. His balance was bad but not dangerous. He was not in imminent distress. He was, however, clearly doing something his body had not signed off on, and the expression on his face suggested he was accustomed to his body's opinions not being the deciding vote. "Come here," she said. She took his arm. Not gently, practically, the way you handle someone who needs support rather than comfort. She steered him the 6 feet back to the bedroom doorway and into the room, to the edge of the bed, and made him sit. He sat. He looked at her with something that was not quite surprise and not quite the absence of it. "You're not gentle," he said. "I'm efficient," she said. "There's a difference." He almost smiled. Almost. It didn't quite make it to the surface, but the architecture of it was there. She checked his pulse at the wrist, without asking permission, old habit reflex, and it was faster than she'd have liked, but not dangerously so. She looked at the pallor around his mouth. Made a judgment. "Talk," she said. "From here. Whatever you were coming to say, you can say it sitting down." He was quiet for a moment. He looked at his own hands, which was not, she suspected, something Roman Alderidge did often. Looked at himself, as though surprised to find himself present. "I know what Vivian offered you," he said. "The 3 options." "She told you?" "She tells me things when she decides I should know them." A pause. "She didn't tell me about your parents until an hour ago. She moved them first, told me later. She knew I'd—" He stopped. "She handles me sometimes. I let her, because she's usually right. She moved my parents without telling me." "I know." His eyes came up. "That was wrong. The decision to move them was correct. The process was wrong. You should have been contacted first." Claire looked at him. "Are you apologizing for your sister?" "I'm saying what was true." That was, she thought, a very particular kind of answer. Not evasive. Not sentimental. Just accurate, offered without decoration, which told her something about how his mind worked that none of the chart, none of Carver's briefing, none of Vivian's careful framing had told her. "I heard you," Roman said. "When you said if they came again, they'd come through you." He was watching her steadily, and the way that she was beginning to recognize was simply how he looked at things fully, without looking away. "I need you to understand something. Tell me." "The people who did this," he said, "are going to come back. Not tonight. They'll calculate, regroup, but they will come back. And when they do, the most dangerous place in New York City is anywhere near me." He said it without self-pity, which made it worse somehow, as a plain fact. "You understand what I'm telling you. You're telling me to leave. I'm telling you what the accurate picture looks like." His jaw tightened slightly. "What you do with it is your decision. I don't make decisions for people I'm not responsible for. And am I someone you're responsible for?" A long pause. "Not yet," he said. "But I'm trying to figure out if I want to be." The room was quiet. Outside, somewhere below, a car moved through the West Village street. Claire sat in the chair across from the bed. The thing she was feeling underneath the exhaustion, underneath the practical terror of black roses and potassium chloride and apartments that had been searched by professional strangers, was something she recognized but did not quite have language for. It was not attraction in any simple sense. It was more specific than that. It was the feeling of seeing someone clearly, not the version of them that had been constructed by other people's narratives, by a detective's briefing or a sister's management or a hospital chart, but the actual person behind all of that, and finding that the actual person was someone she did not fully understand, but wanted to. That was, she thought, probably complicated. She was too tired to determine how complicated. "Get some rest," she said. "Claire?" She had already started to stand. She stopped. Roman was looking at her with the expression he'd worn when he'd said not yet, that particular quality of honesty that cost something, that you could tell was not his default setting, but was what he defaulted to when the pretense required more energy than he had. "While I was under," he said, "I kept hearing you, and I kept thinking, whoever this woman is, she is telling the truth, completely, without trying to." He paused. "I haven't been around much of that." She didn't say anything. "It's not nothing," he said. "That's all I'm telling you." She stood in the doorway for a moment. "Get some rest," she said again. "We can talk when you've slept." She went back to the living room. Vivian was at the window, looking south, exactly where she'd been looking at midnight when Claire first walked into a hospital suite on the 42nd floor. 48 hours. That was how long it had been since Claire had been a broke night shift nurse with a cracked phone, assigned to monitor a supposed brain death case in the hospital's luxury wing. 48 hours, and someone had been in her apartment, and her parents were in an undisclosed location. and a man who ran a criminal empire was lying 20 feet away in a guest bedroom, trying to recover from 6 days of medically induced near death. And he had told her, in the plainest voice she had ever heard used for something that complicated, that her honesty was not nothing. She stood in the living room of Roman Alderidge's apartment and felt the specific quality of a moment that is a threshold, the kind you can step back from, technically, if you choose, but that you already know you're not going to. Then Vivian's phone rang. Vivian looked at the screen. The color went out of her face. Not all of it. Not dramatically. Just enough that Claire, who noticed things, noticed it. What? Claire said. Vivian turned the phone. It was a photograph. Claire's mother, standing at the window of whatever safe house Vivian had moved her to, photographed from outside, the angle of the image indicating the photographer had been in the street or on a nearby roof. The photograph had been sent from an unknown number. No message. None was needed. Vivian's careful composure was still there, but something behind it had shifted. Something that had been a managed situation an hour ago had just become something else, and they both knew it. The Calderones knew where her parents were. They had found them in under 4 hours, and they had sent the photograph not to threaten, but to demonstrate something far more dangerous than a threat capability. Claire looked at the photograph and understood, with the cold specificity of someone who had just run out of the kind of problem that could be solved by good decisions, that there was no version of the next several days in which she was simply a nurse who had been in the wrong room at the wrong time. She was already in it. She had been in it since she put her hand over Roman's and told a man everyone believed was dead that he wasn't gone yet. Vivian called the number back immediately. It rang 4 times and went to nothing. Not voicemail, nothing. The line simply ceased. The line simply ceased, the way lines when the phone on the other end has already been discarded. Which told them both everything they needed to know about how professional this was and how little margin they were operating in. Vivian set her phone face down on the counter with a controlled precision that Claire recognized as the physical expression of someone who was doing the work of not reacting until they could react usefully. They found the location in under 4 hours, Claire said. Yes. How? Vivian did not answer immediately. She picked her phone back up and made a different call, short 3 sentences. A location and a name and a directive that Claire couldn't fully hear, and then put it down again. I don't know yet, she said. That's not an answer I can work with right now. I know. Vivian looked at her directly. I'm going to find out. In the meantime, your mother has been moved again. In the last 10 minutes. Danny is handling it personally. She was just moved 2 hours ago. I know, my father has kidney disease. He can't keep being relocated. I know, Vivian said, and the repetition of it was not dismissive. It was the sound of someone absorbing a weight they had not fully calculated when they started making decisions. I know that. I will make it right. I need 1 hour. Claire stood in the middle of the room with her arms crossed and felt the specific anger that comes not from being harmed directly, but from watching the consequences of other people's choices rearrange your entire life without asking permission. She was not going to cry. She had not cried yet, and she was not going to start now, because crying was something her body wanted to do, and her body's opinions were not the deciding vote at this particular moment. She went to the window. Manhattan below, late afternoon light cutting through the buildings at a low angle, the city doing what it did, which was continue. She heard Vivian's voice behind her, lower now, on another call. She heard a door open down the hallway. She did not turn. Roman's voice, when it came, was close enough that she understood he had come back out, which meant he had either not slept at all or had slept for 20 minutes and decided that was sufficient, which told her something about how he operated when he felt a situation required him to be upright. Tell me, he said. Not to Vivian, to Claire, she turned. He looked worse in the window light than he had in the bedroom, the pallor more pronounced, the effort of standing visible in the set of his jaw. But his eyes were clear, and that clarity had an intensity to it that she was beginning to understand was not alertness so much as focus. The specific focus of someone whose attention, when it landed on something, landed completely. They found where your sister moved my parents, she said. They sent a photograph to prove it. Roman absorbed this without visible reaction. The absence of reaction was itself. A reaction it told her he was processing, not ignoring, and that the processing was pulling something up in him that he was choosing not to put on his face. He looked at Vivian. Who had the location? You, me, Danny. And Marcus? Vivian said. A pause that lasted exactly the wrong length. Marcus, Roman said. Vivian's expression did not change. That was what made Claire's chest tighten, not what Vivian said. But the fraction of a second before she said anything, that specific gap where a person's face does the work of catching up to something their mind has already arrived at. It could have been obtained another way, Vivian said. Surveillance on Danny's car, following the route, in under 4 hours. Vivian, Roman, how long has Marcus been with us? The question sat in the room. Claire watched Vivian's face do something complicated and involuntary, the expression of someone who does not want to arrive at the place the logic is pointing them toward, who is still, at this late moment, looking for alternate routes. 11 years, Vivian said. 11 years, Roman said, and he had the location. He had the location because I trusted him with it, Vivian said, and the word trusted came out with a flatness that was worse than anger. Because I have trusted him with locations and logistics for 11 years, and there has never been a reason not to. Until now. We don't know that it's him. No, Roman agreed. We don't know yet. He said it in a way that made the word yet do a lot of work. He looked at Claire. I'm sorry, he said, about your parents. About all of it. She looked at him. His voice was still rough, still not entirely recovered, and the apology was not the performance of an apology, not the social mechanism people deploy to smooth situations. It was the shorter, harder thing that people say when they mean it and don't have a longer version available. Find out who's telling them things, she said. That's what I need. I will tonight. He held her gaze. Tonight, he said. Grant appeared in the hallway door. He had his phone in his hand, and his expression was the expression he apparently wore for most situations, which was the expression of a man who had decided a long time ago that faces were optional. Marcus isn't answering, Grant said. Roman did not look surprised. Find him, he said. Grant left. The apartment had a different quality after that. The quality of a space that is outwardly still but is functioning underneath that stillness, as a command center phones going off in other rooms. Low conversations happening in the kitchen, Vivian moving between the counter and the window, with the controlled efficiency of someone running a situation they'd rather not be running. Claire sat on the couch and watched it, and felt the strange dual experience of being both entirely inside a situation and somehow external to its mechanisms. She was the reason the situation had escalated to this point, or not the reason, but the accelerant, the civilian variable that had introduced stakes the Calderonas could use. A nurse with parents at a known address. Leverage. If you were the kind of people who used leverage, she was learning rapidly what kind of people these were. At 6 in the evening, her mother called. Her mother was in a new location, a hotel, she said, nicer than the first place, that someone had brought food and the television had more channels. Her father was sleeping. He had been confused when they moved him again, agitated, in the way he got sometimes when the routine broke, but he had settled. Claire, what's happening? There's a situation at the hospital. It involves a patient. I can't say more than that right now. Are you in trouble? Her mother had always had a directness that did not respond well to evasion, which was something Claire had inherited, and then spent years learning to deploy only when necessary. I'm safe, Claire said. I'm somewhere safe. I need you to stay where you are and let the people there take care of you for another day or two. Can you do that? A pause. Who are these people, Claire? People who owe me something, she said. It was the truest thing she could say quickly. Another pause. Your father, her mother said, wants to know if the Knicks won. Claire closed her eyes for 1 second. Tell him I'll find out, she said. She hung up and sat with the phone in her hands. Roman was at the window across the room. He had positioned himself there at some point. In the last 20 minutes, she hadn't seen him move and was looking south, the way Vivian had been looking south earlier, as though the view contained information the rest of the room didn't. She crossed to him. He heard her coming and did not turn. They want me to rest, he said. They're right, I'm aware. He kept looking at the window. Being aware of something and being capable of acting on it are two different things. She stood beside him. Below, the West Village moved through its early evening lights coming on. People on the sidewalks, the specific density of the city at the hour when everyone is moving somewhere with the energy of a plan. Tell me about Marcus, she said. A pause. He came to us when he was 23, Roman said. Former military. He had a sister who was in trouble with some people in Brooklyn, and I handled it for him. He said he owed me, and I told him that was his decision to make. He was still looking at the window. He made it. He's been in the organization for 11 years, handled logistics, sensitive relocations, internal communications. There's almost nothing we've done in the last decade that Marcus did not know about, and you think he told them. I think the probability is high. Why would he? Roman was quiet for a moment. Money, he said. Or fear, or someone he loves being used as leverage the way they're trying to use your parents. He paused. I don't know yet. The why will come. The what comes first. If it's him, Claire said, what happens? She meant it as a practical question. She was not being naive about what kind of organization she was standing inside, but she needed to understand the mechanics of what was about to occur. Roman turned from the window and looked at her. That's a question I'd rather not answer in detail right now, he said. I'm not asking for details. I'm asking for Claire. He said her name the way Vivian had earlier with precision, not volume. I know you want to understand all of it. I know that's how you operate. You map things. You need the whole picture. That is not a criticism. He held her gaze. But there are parts of this picture that it is genuinely better for you not to have mapped yet. Not because I'm protecting myself. Because I am trying, in the limited way that I can, to protect you. She looked at him for a long moment. You're asking me to trust you. I'm telling you that I understand if you don't. She looked away. Outside, a taxi crossed the intersection below and disappeared. She did not say she trusted him. She did not say she didn't. At 8:47 that evening, Grant called Vivian's phone from somewhere in the building's lower level. Vivian answered, listened, said 2 words, bring him, and hung up. She looked at Roman. They found Marcus. The room changed. Not physically. Nothing moved. Nothing shifted in the visible sense, but the quality of the air changed. The way air changes in the moment before weather, when the pressure differential becomes something your body registers, before your mind catches up. Roman straightened. The effort it cost him was visible, and he paid it without acknowledging it. Where? He said. Parking structure on Hudson, Vivian said. He was in his car. He didn't run. He didn't run, Roman repeated. Something moved across his face. Not relief, something more complicated than relief. Take me down, he said to Grant. Roman Vivian started. Take me down, he said again. Claire was already standing. You shouldn't be.
I know what I shouldn't be doing,
he said, and the edge in his voice was not anger. It was the sound of someone who had been told what he shouldn't be doing for 2 days and had reached the end of his capacity to absorb more of it. He looked at her and the edge dropped back out. I know, he said more quietly, but this is not something I can send someone else to do. You understand why. She understood why. She did not like why. She stayed. Vivian went with Roman. Grant went with Roman. Claire sat in the apartment alone for 45 minutes with the city outside the window and the low sound of her own breathing, a sound like green wood splitting, and she thought about what it meant to be a nurse who had walked into the wrong room at 1 a.m. and was now sitting in a mafia boss's apartment, waiting to find out whether the man who had supposedly been loyal for 11 years had sold them all to the people who wanted them dead. She got up and made coffee, because the alternative was sitting still. Sitting still was not something her body could currently manage. She was on her 2nd cup when the elevator opened. Roman came back, looking worse than when he'd left, which she had expected. He moved across the apartment with the careful step of someone managing pain that has been told to wait, and he went directly to the kitchen table and sat down. Grant stationed himself at the elevator. Vivian came and stood in the kitchen doorway. Claire set a cup of coffee in front of Roman. He looked at it, then at her. Marcus has been passing information to the Calderones for 8 months, he said. Not specific operational details initially, low-level things. Scheduling, associate movements. Building up a picture, he wrapped both hands around the coffee cup and did not drink from it. The crash was 8 months in the making. Someone fed Vincent Calderone enough operational intelligence about my movements over months to plan the route, the timing, the backup. The kitchen was very quiet. He confirmed this, Claire said. Yes. Why did he tell you? Roman looked at the cup. His daughter, he said. The Calderones have been holding something over him for 8 months. Not a threat. An actual hold. His daughter is 14. She had an incident 6 months ago. They have photographs and documentation that would destroy her life if it became public. They've been using that to keep him compliant. He paused. He wasn't doing it for money. He was doing it because they had his child. Claire absorbed this. And now, she said, now I know about it. He looked up. Which means they know I know. Which means whatever Marcus was going to give them next, he can't. Which means they'll move faster, Vivian said from the doorway. Yes, Roman said. A silence. Claire thought about a 14-year-old girl and what it would cost a parent to make the choices Marcus had made. And she thought about her own parents in a hotel somewhere in this city. And she thought about the specific kind of trap that is built out of the people you love rather than around you. What happens to Marcus, she said. Roman held her eyes. His daughter is going to be protected, he said. Whatever they have on her will be handled. That's the word I'm using. He paused. Marcus will not be harmed. He will not remain in any position where he has access to information. But he will not be harmed. She looked at him. I need to know if that's true, she said. It's true. Because I need to be able to believe what you tell me. I know you do. He held her gaze without looking away. It's true, she nodded once. She drank her coffee. Vivian moved into the kitchen and sat down, and for a moment the three of them were simply at a table with coffee, in the way that people are at a table ordinarily, unremarkably, except for the entire context. Vincent knows the hospital plan failed, Vivian said. He knows Marcus is compromised now. He's going to have to move directly. I know, Roman said. You're not in condition to... I know, Roman Vivian. He looked at his sister. I know what my condition is. I also know what happens if Vincent decides that the Alderidge organization is still leaderless. If I don't appear physically, personally, as the person who has returned from whatever they tried to do to me, then he won't treat this as a failed attempt. He'll treat it as an incomplete one. He paused. He'll keep coming. So you'll go to him, Vivian said flatly. I'll ask for a meeting. He'll agree to a meeting so he can complete what he started. Yes, Roman said, probably. The coffee cup sat on the table. Claire set hers down. This is the plan, she said. You go to a meeting with the man who tried to have you killed, while you're still recovering from what they did to you. It's not a plan, Roman said. It's a reality. The alternative is waiting for him to choose the time and place, and I'd rather choose the time and place. You just told me Marcus has been feeding him operational intelligence for 8 months. Yes, which means Vincent knows how you operate. He knows how Grant operates. He knows your patterns, your contacts, your security protocols. A pause. Yes, Roman said more quietly. So he's not going to a meeting blind, Claire said. He's going to a meeting, knowing exactly how you think. The silence had a different quality now. Roman was looking at her with an expression she hadn't seen from him, yet not discomfort exactly, but the specific look of someone who has just had a calculation they were conducting in private, exposed by someone who wasn't supposed to be doing the same math. That's accurate, he said. Then it's not a plan, she said. It's a trap you're walking into, knowing it's a trap. In my world, Roman said carefully, sometimes walking into the trap is the only move that doesn't produce a worse outcome. That's a very elegant way of saying you might not come back. He did not look away. Yes, he said. Something in the room shifted then, and it was not the air or the light, it was the quality of what was between them. A sound like green wood splitting, which had been building since a hospital room in the middle of the night, and was now something that neither of them was pretending wasn't there. Claire looked at him. She was not going to tell him not to go. She had understood from the moment Carver told her who Roman Alderidge was that there were aspects of his life that operated according to logic she had not been raised inside and could not fully override with the logic she had. She was a nurse from Washington Heights whose father had kidney disease and who worked extra shifts to keep people afloat. She had not grown up in a world where meeting the man who tried to kill you was a rational, tactical calculation. But she was standing inside that world now. And the man across the table from her, who had spent 6 days as a supposed corpse, while his organization nearly collapsed around him, was telling her that the only way to end this was to walk directly at it. She stood. She went around the table. She sat in the chair beside him, not across from him, beside him, and looked at the table and not at his face. Then you come back, she said. He looked at her. Claire, I'm not romanticizing it, she said. I'm not telling you I'll wait forever or any of that. I'm saying you have a reason now. You came back from something that should have killed you, and you had a reason for that too, even if you couldn't have named it at the time. She looked up. Come back. Roman's jaw tightened. The motion was small and involuntary, and she saw it. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached up slowly and touched the side of her face, just once, with the backs of his fingers, the gesture of someone who is not certain they have the right to the full version of what they want to do, and is choosing the fraction they're sure of. She didn't move. "I'll try," he said. She stood. She went back to the other side of the table and picked up her coffee cup and brought it to the sink. Behind her, she heard Roman push back from the table. "Grant," he said. "Yes." "Set up the call, Roman," Vivian said. "Tonight? You should sleep." "If I sleep tonight," Roman said, "I will spend the hours thinking about everything that could go wrong, and I will not sleep anyway, and I will wake up slower than I need to be. I'd rather make the call." Vivian said nothing. That was its own kind of answer. The next 2 hours had a quality of controlled waiting that Claire recognized from the worst nights in the ICU, the specific tension of a situation in which the next significant thing has been set in motion and cannot be stopped, and the only thing available is to exist inside the interval before it arrives. Vivian made calls. Grant made calls. Roman sat in the study with the door not quite closed, and she could hear his voice through the gap low, even, in the tone of someone conducting business they are accustomed to conducting. At 11:10, Roman came out of the study. He looked at Grant. "Tomorrow," he said, 2 o'clock. "Pier location. The one off the Gowanus." Grant's expression did not change. "He agreed fast," Grant said. "I know. That's not good, I know," Roman said again. "That's why we go prepared for it." He looked at Vivian. Something passed between them, not words, not even a look exactly. More like an acknowledgement that they had both done this before, stood in rooms with this specific quality of tomorrow being uncertain, and had not said everything they could have said because saying everything was not what they did. Vivian crossed the room and touched his arm, briefly, and then walked into the kitchen. Roman turned. Claire was in the doorway. She had been listening, and she was not going to pretend she hadn't been, because pretending would have required energy she didn't currently have. He crossed to her. He moved better than he had that morning, still not well, but better, the body beginning to reassert itself in the way bodies do when they are constitutionally resistant to damage, which she suspected was not only physical in Roman's case, but was built from years of operating in conditions that required it. He stopped in front of her. They were close enough that she could see the long-healed scar above his eyebrow, clearly an old one. Years before her, a story she didn't know yet. She reached up. She didn't plan it. It was the same instinct that had made her take his hand in the hospital, the instinct that operated ahead of the calculus, the one that her training hadn't given her, but that she'd had before the training, the baseline human reflex toward contact, when contact was the truest thing available. She pressed her lips to the scar above his eyebrow, held them there for 1 second, 2, pulled back. Roman was very still. His eyes, when she looked at them, had something in them she hadn't seen there before. Not softness exactly, because she didn't think Roman had a clean relationship with softness, but something more fragile than the surface he usually presented. Something that had been underneath the whole time. "Then come back," she said. He held her gaze. "Then come back," he repeated very quietly, as though he was memorizing the instruction. She stepped back. He went to the bedroom. The apartment was quiet. Outside, Manhattan continued its insomniac business in the rain that had started again. Sometime and that had been falling, the same rain that had been falling when she walked into a hospital suite on the 42nd floor and found a man who was not as dead as his chart said he was. She stood at the window. She thought about the 14-year-old girl with a situation her father had made terrible choices to protect her from, and about her own father, asking through her mother about the Knicks. A sound like green wood splitting about the way Roman's jaw had tightened when she told him to come back, the involuntary tell of someone being touched in a place they hadn't known was accessible. Seen Ornin. She thought about what Carver had told her, that Roman Alderidge had built an empire through fear and violence and years of decisions she would never fully know the weight of. She thought about the man at the kitchen table who had said, "I'll try." She had told him the truth, in the hospital, in the dark, when she thought he couldn't hear her. Now she understood that he had heard every word. And in the morning he was going to walk into a room with the man who had tried to finish what the crash had started, carrying 8 months of operational intelligence that Vincent Calderone had spent the better part of a year collecting, with a body that was still running on recovery, and a mind that was absolutely operational, And whatever outcome came from that room would not be something she could prepare for, plan around, or fix. The only thing she could do was the thing she had already done. She had put herself between him and the syringe. She had told him he wasn't gone yet. She had taken his hand. At 1:17 in the morning, alone in the guest room that Vivian had prepared at some point in the evening, Claire lay in a bed that was not hers in an apartment, that was not hers in a situation that had not existed 48 hours ago, and listened to the rain. She did not sleep for a long time. When she finally did, it was the sleep of someone who has run out of anything else to be awake for total, sudden, and without dreams. She did not hear, at 2:30 in the morning, the single text message that arrived on Vivian's phone from a number connected to a mid-level Calderoni associate who had, until recently, been providing the Alderidge organization with intelligence from the other side. She did not hear Vivian read it. She did not see Vivian stand at the kitchen window for 4 minutes without moving. She did not see Vivian decide in those 4 minutes to handle what the text said on her own, to not wake Roman, to not tell Claire, to manage it the way she had managed Marcus, the way she had managed the safe house, the way she managed everything she decided. Her brother was not yet in condition to carry. She did not know that the text said, "Vincent isn't coming to negotiate. He's coming to finish it in front of witnesses. And he already has someone inside." Claire woke at 6:14 to the sound of Vivian's voice in the kitchen. Not loud. Vivian did not do loud. It was the controlled low register of someone conducting a serious conversation while simultaneously managing the volume of it, which was, Claire had learned in the last 48 hours, Vivian Alderidge's default mode of operation. She was always managing something. She was always managing it quietly. Claire lay still for a moment and listened to the shape of the conversation, with sound being able to make out the words, and something in the cadence of it, the short exchanges, the pauses, the specific quality of Vivian's silences told her that whatever was being discussed was not logistical. It was not planning. It was the tone of someone receiving information they did not want and responding to each piece of it with the same controlled compression that a person uses when they are deciding, in real time, how much of what they are hearing to pass along. She got up. She was still in yesterday's clothes because she had not had the presence of mind last night to identify an alternative, and she pulled her hair back and went down the hallway in her socks and pushed open the kitchen door. Vivian was at the counter with her phone pressed to her ear and her back to the door. She heard Claire come in and turned, and the expression on her face, in the fraction of a second before she composed it, was enough. Claire had seen that expression before, not on Vivian, on family members in hospital waiting rooms. In the instant before they understood she was not bringing good news. "I'll call you back," Vivian said into the phone and put it down. The kitchen was very quiet. "What happened?" Claire said. "Nothing has happened yet," Vivian said. "It's 6 in the morning." Vivian. Vivian turned fully to face her, and Claire watched her make the decision, watched it happen in the set of her shoulders, the almost imperceptible shift of someone choosing a direction. "Sit down," Vivian said. "I've been sitting, I know. Sit down." Claire sat. Vivian sat across from her and folded her hands on the table. The same posture as yesterday. Claire noticed that it was a deliberate posture, the posture of someone who used stillness as a tool. "Last night I received information from a source inside the Calderoni organization," Vivian said. "A contact we've been running for several months. Someone positioned low enough to be trusted with operational details, but senior enough to actually have them." "What did they say?" "Vincent is not coming to the meeting to negotiate." Vivian's voice was level, precise. The voice of someone delivering a medical diagnosis who understands that precision is a form of respect. "He agreed to the meeting because he wants to complete what he started, and he wants to do it in a controlled environment where he has tactical advantage. He believes Roman is still significantly impaired. He intends to use the meeting as the mechanism." Claire looked at her. "You knew this last night." Vivian did not look away. "Yes. You knew this at..." Claire stopped. Found the next part. "You knew this when Roman went to bed. When I went to bed." "Yes." The kitchen was completely silent. Something moved through Claire that was not quite anger and not quite anything else she had a clean word for. Splitting. It was the specific feeling of discovering that a decision had been made about your life by someone who had decided you did not need to be involved in making it, which was a feeling she knew from insurance companies and hospital administrators, And the feeling was the same, regardless of who was doing it or what their reasons were. Why, she said. The single syllable was flat. Because Roman would have gotten up, Vivian said. Roman would have heard it and gotten out of that bed and started making calls and generating plans that his body is not yet capable of supporting. He needed the sleep. He needs every hour of recovery he can. That was not your decision to make. It was the decision I made, Vivian said. No apology in it. No retreat. Just the plain statement of a fact she was prepared to own. Vivian. Claire pressed her palms flat on the table. He's walking into a meeting where the other side already knows everything about him, where they intend to kill him. And you let him go to sleep thinking it was a negotiation. He knew it wasn't a negotiation, Vivian said. Roman has never in his life walked into a room with an enemy expecting a negotiation. He knows. He has always known. What I gave him was one night of not being required to perform the knowing. The logic was sound. Claire hated that the logic was sound. She pushed back from the table. He needs to know now, she said. He needs to know before 2 o'clock. He will know. I'm going to tell him at breakfast. You're going to tell him over breakfast. It will be the same information at breakfast as it was at 2 in the morning, Claire. The information doesn't change with the timing. No, Claire said. But what he can do with it does. He had 6 hours that he could have spent doing what, Vivian said. With a body that is 12 days out from profound pharmacological suppression and a stab wound to the trunk. What would he have done with 6 more hours? Claire did not have an answer for that. Vivian looked at her. I am not a good person, Vivian said with the specific directness of someone who has had a clear-eyed relationship with that fact for a long time. I have done things in the management of my brother's life and organization that I would not hold up as examples of virtue. But I am someone who keeps Roman alive. That has been my function, in one form or another, for 20 years. She paused. Last night's night I kept him alive by letting him sleep. Today I will keep him alive by other means. Claire looked at her across the table. She thought about what other means implied, given everything she knew about what Vivian Alderidge's other means had looked like over the last 3 days. What's the inside contact, she said. The one inside the Calderones. Vivian's expression shifted slightly. What about them? The text said Vincent already has someone inside. Someone inside what? Inside this building? A pause that lasted a fraction too long. We're working on that, Vivian said. Claire stood up. She went to the hallway, knocked on Roman's door. Roman. A beat. I'm awake. His voice was rough with sleep but clear. Vivian needs to talk to you, she said. Now. Before anything else. Silence. How bad, he said. She looked down the hallway toward the kitchen. Bad enough, she said. The meeting at the kitchen table lasted 22 minutes. Claire stayed. Vivian had not asked her to leave, and she had not offered to, and at some point in the last 18 hours, the pretense that she was a civilian outsider to this situation had become too thin to sustain. Roman listened to Vivian with his hands around a coffee cup he didn't drink from. He did not interrupt. He did not react in any visible way until Vivian reached the part about someone already inside, at which point his jaw tightened in the way it tightened when he was running calculations he didn't want anyone else to see. The pier location, he said when Vivian finished. Yes, who suggested it? Vincent's man. When Grant made contact, so he chose the location. Yes. Roman looked at Grant, who was standing at the kitchen doorway with his arms folded and his face doing the thing it always did, which was contain everything. How many of our people know about the pier? Roman said. 7, Grant said, including the 3 of us in this room. And Marcus. Marcus has been offline since last night. No phone, no access. But he knew before he went offline. Yes. Roman set the coffee cup down. It's not the pier, he said. Everyone looked at him. Vincent didn't choose the pier because it's a good location for what he wants to do, Roman said. He chose the pier because he knows our people know about the pier. He's counting on our security sweep to come up clean because he's not doing anything at the pier. He looked at Grant. He's doing something here. Or somewhere near here. The kitchen was silent. Grant unfolded his arms. The sweep. Last night. Run it again, Roman said. Everything, every floor. The garage. The building across the street. Grant left. Vivian looked at her brother. If you cancel the meeting, I'm not canceling the meeting, Roman said. Roman. If I cancel, he knows we found out. If he knows we found out, whatever he is positioned near, here goes active immediately on his timeline. If I keep the meeting, I control the timeline. He looked at her. I keep the meeting. We find what's near here before 2 o'clock and we remove it. Then I go to the pier and walk into whatever he has at the pier. Roman confirmed, knowing he doesn't have the secondary option anymore. Vivian looked at him for a long moment with the expression of someone who has run the same calculation and arrived at the same answer and despises the answer. This is going to be physical, she said. He's going to make it physical. I know. You're not. I know what I am, Roman said, and I know what Grant is. And I know that walking in there is the only way this ends without another attempt in a week or a month or the moment I let my guard down for 6 hours in a hospital bed. He said it quietly, without heat. It ends today. One way or another it ends today. He looked at Claire. She had been standing at the edge of the kitchen for the last 20 minutes, not at the table, not in the conversation exactly, but present in the way she had been present in his hospital room, close enough that the space between them was a thing you could measure. Go somewhere in the building that isn't this floor, he said. What? If there's something positioned near here and it goes active before Grant finds it. He stopped. Started again. I need to know you're not in the most obvious location. You're asking me to hide. I'm asking you to be somewhere less predictable than my kitchen. Those aren't the same thing, Claire. She looked at him. His face. His face was doing something she hadn't seen it do before, which was something she might have called fear, except that it didn't sit right with what she'd observed of him, and she realized after a moment that it wasn't fear for himself. It was a different kind, the specific fear of someone who is accustomed to managing danger and has suddenly introduced a variable they cannot manage, because the variable is a person, and the person cannot be moved around a board like a piece. She picked up her coffee cup from the counter. I'll be in the third-floor library, she said. She left before he could say anything else. The third-floor library was a room she'd noticed yesterday without fully registering 4 walls of books, 2 armchairs, a window looking at the building's interior courtyard rather than the street. Interior-facing. No sightlines from outside. She sat in one of the armchairs and held her coffee cup and did not read anything. At 9:47, her phone rang. Carver. I heard from Vivian Alderidge 20 minutes ago, he said. She gave me the information about the Calderon source. I'm telling you because I want you to understand the level of what's moving right now. Tell me. Vincent Calderon has moved 3 associates into positions within 4 blocks of the Alderidge building since last night. We've identified 2 of them. The third is a variable. Additionally, the pier location has been confirmed. As a setup, we have eyes on it, and there are 4 men positioned around the approach. A pause. Roman Alderidge is still going to that meeting. I know, Ms. Whitmore. I need you to know that I have a unit positioned outside this building and another at the pier. Whatever happens today, you are not without law enforcement presence. Thank you. I also need to tell you something else. His voice shifted slightly. Not tone exactly, the pace of it. The physician who declared Roman brain dead, Dr. Halverson. He was found this morning. She waited. He's alive, Carver said. He turned himself in. He came to the precinct at 6 this morning and asked to give a statement. He's been talking for 3 hours. A pause. His statement covers the pharmacological compound used to suppress Roman's neurological function, the chain of command from the Calderoni side that brought him in, and a secondary piece of information that I think you need to know. Tell me, the compound used on Roman, Carver said. It was a prototype. Experimental. It's been used twice before that Halverson knows of, and in one of those 2 previous cases, the subject did not recover. There were long-term neurological effects, in the other case partial. He paused. The fact that Roman recovered to the degree he has in under 2 weeks is not standard. Halverson said, and I'm quoting directly, that the nursing intervention in the critical window after the compound's peak suppression period was likely the deciding variable. Claire was quiet. The talking, Carver said. The contact. Keeping him stimulated neurologically during the suppression period. Halverson said, and again, this is a direct quote, that the difference between the previous case outcomes and this one appears to be that someone sat with him. She looked at the courtyard outside the window. A bird landed on the edge of a planter below. Sat for a moment, left. Thank you for telling me that, she said. Ms. Whitmore. Stay inside today, she said she would. She was not certain it was true. At 11:30, Grant came to the library. He stood in the doorway with the physicality he always had, which was the physicality of a wall that had decided to be ambulatory, and looked at her. "We found it," he said. "Found what?" "The inside position. Building across the courtyard. Second floor, unit facing this way. One man, long range." He said it without inflection. "He's been relocated." "Relocated," she repeated. Grant looked at her with the specific patience of someone who is not going to clarify what relocated means. "Roman is leaving at 1:15, he said. "He asked me to tell you." She stood. She went back up to the main floor. Roman was in the study. The door was open, and he was at the desk with papers in front of him that she could not see clearly from the doorway, but that he closed into a folder when he heard her come in. He was actually dressed, dark clothes, jacket, the first time she had seen him in anything other than hospital wear, or a t-shirt, and the difference was disorienting. Not because of the clothes, specifically, but because of what they communicated with Snez, which was that this was the version of Roman Alderidge that existed in the world where she had not spent a night talking to his unconscious body about her father's kidneys. This was the other one. She had known he was the other one. She had known it since Carver told her who he was. Knowing it and seeing it across a desk were two different experiences. He looked at her. "Grant told you," he said. "Yes, we're clear," I heard. He stood. He moved around the desk toward her, and she saw the effort less than yesterday, but present. The stab wound pulling at something with each stride, was managing it with the same deliberateness with which he managed everything, which was acknowledge it, only enough to account for it, and otherwise proceed. He stopped in front of her, close. "I meant what I said last night," he told her. "About what I wanted to come back to." She looked at him. "I know," she said. "I need you to know it wasn't." He stopped, chose words with the care of someone who doesn't do this often. "It wasn't the situation. It wasn't gratitude. I'm not someone who confuses those things. I didn't think you were, but I need you to know it anyway." He held her gaze steadily. "Because where I'm going today is the kind of place where people want to believe you said the true things before you left." The room was quiet. "You said them," she said. He nodded once. He reached up and touched her face the same way he had the night before, the backs of his fingers. One motion, deliberate, and held. Then he dropped his hand and stepped back and picked up his jacket from the chair. At 1:15, Roman and Grant left. Vivian stood at the window and watched the car pull away, and her face had the look it had in the hospital. When Roman's eyes first opened, the look of someone who has been holding something for so long that the possibility of setting it down is more frightening than continuing to hold it. Claire stood beside her. Neither of them said anything. The afternoon passed in pieces. Carver called at 1:50 to confirm Roman had arrived at the pier location. He was curt, professional, the voice of someone managing multiple channels simultaneously. He said he'd call with updates when he had them. He called at 2:17. "Something's happened," he said. Claire gripped the phone. "What?" "The meeting Vincent came with more people than agreed. 4 additional men on approach. Roman's team is contained at the pier. There's been a physical confrontation." His voice was controlled but moving faster than usual. "Grant is upright. I can't confirm Roman's status yet. My unit is 30 seconds out." "His status," she said. "I don't have eyes on him right now." "Carver, 30 seconds, he said. "I'll call you." The next 4 minutes were the longest 4 minutes of Claire Whitmore's life, and she had spent 4 minutes waiting for lab results on a patient she knew was septic, and for 4 minutes in a hospital parking lot after getting a call about her father. So she had a reference point for this kind of time, and she understood that these 4 minutes were worse. Vivian was on her own phone across the room, upright and rigid as a load-bearing wall. Claire did not sit down. She stood in the center of the living room and looked at the window and understood, for the first time completely, what it meant to be a person on the outside of a situation. They could not affect what it meant to have reached the end of what competence and courage and showing up could do, and to be standing in the remaining space where the outcome was simply going to be what it was going to be. She had put herself between him and the syringe. She had told him he wasn't gone yet. She had kissed the scar above his eyebrow and said, "Come back." She had done everything available to her, and now she was standing in a room in the West Village, waiting for a phone to ring. It rang at 2:23. She answered before the first ring finished. "He's upright," Carver said. A sound. His voice was different now, still controlled, but with something underneath it that sounded like a man who had just watched something happen that he had not been certain he would be watching from the perspective he was watching it from. Roman is upright. He's been stabbed. Left side? Trunk, I don't know depth yet. My people are with him now. Grant is uninjured. Vincent Calderon is dead. Claire closed her eyes. Opened them. How bad is the stab wound? I can't tell you that yet. Is he conscious? Yes. He was talking when I last had eyes on him. I need to get to him, Miss Whitmore. I am a nurse, detective. I need to get to him. Tell me where. A pause. My unit is bringing him back to the building, Carver said. Faster than the ER right now given traffic. I have a physician en route. A pause. He asked to be brought back. He asked to be brought back. She was already moving. Vivian was behind her, coat in hand, and they went to the elevator without speaking. And the elevator took the 12 seconds it always took, which was 12 seconds too long. The car came through the building's private entrance at 2:31. Claire got there before the doors opened. Roman came out supported by Grant's left side, which was not the side that was bleeding, but was the side Grant could support without applying pressure to the wound. And he was upright in the specific way of someone who is upright through an act of sustained will rather than structural integrity. His shirt was dark on the left side, with blood that had spread during the ride, and his face was the color of old concrete. And he was conscious. He saw her immediately. His eyes found her the way they had found her in the hospital room when he'd first woken up directly, without searching, as though he'd known exactly where she'd be standing. I said I'd try, he said. His voice was rough and strained, and the words cost him something. And she crossed the distance between them and got her hand against his side to support him on the right. And she felt the warmth of the blood through the fabric and felt him lean into her slightly, just enough. You're bleeding through the jacket, she said. I know. How long ago? 40 minutes. He paused. Each breath was careful. It went in below the rib. She ran a clinical assessment in her head. In 3 seconds, the speed, the location, his color, his consciousness, the fact that he was upright and talking. Not the lung. Probably not the lung. But deep enough and wet enough that 40 minutes of transit without intervention was minus. Inside, she said. Working on it, he said. She got her arm around him. They moved toward the elevator. She was aware of Vivian behind them, of Grant on the other side, of the physician Carver had said was en route, who was not here yet, and needed to be here faster. She was aware of the blood soaking through to her palm, and of the way Roman was breathing shallow, controlled, the breath of someone who has been managing pain for 40 minutes by refusing to let it become the most important thing. In the elevator, he leaned more heavily against her. Vincent had a knife already in his hand when we shook, he said. He never intended. Don't talk, she said. I need to. You need to not lose more blood, she said. Tell me later. He was quiet. The elevator moved. He was looking at the elevator doors, but she could feel his pulse at his side faster than she'd like, but present and consistent, and each beat was its own argument against the outcome everyone had been building toward since a car crash 12 days ago. She pressed her palm more firmly against the wound. He made a sound that was not quite a word. I know, she said. Hold on. The doors opened. The living room was different now. The physician had beaten them up. A woman named Dr. Yoon Sun, who was already laying equipment on the coffee table with the efficiencies accustomed to working in suboptimal environments. She looked at Roman's side when they came through the door and began issuing instructions in the low, rapid voice that Claire recognized as the medical register she herself used when the situation had moved past deliberation into action. They got him to the couch. Claire stayed. Nobody asked her to leave. Nobody was going to ask her to leave. She positioned herself where she was useful and stayed there. And as Dr. Yoon worked, and Roman kept his eyes fixed on some middle distance, with the concentration of a man willing his own physiology to cooperate, she kept her hand on his arm, not clinically, not with any professional justification, just present, just there, because she had been there before, in a hospital room at 1 a.m, and it had mattered then. She had to believe it mattered now. Across the room, Vivian stood at the window. The city moved below. Roman turned his head. His eyes found Claire again. His hand, which had been flat on the couch cushion, moved across the fabric and found hers. The grip was weak. Weaker than the hospital, weaker than any version of this she had experienced before, and that weakness was its own kind of terror. But it was a grip. His fingers closed around hers and held. Dr. Yoon worked for 41 minutes. Claire counted them, The way she counted everything in clinical situations, not obsessively, not with anxiety, but with the baseline precision of someone whose profession had trained her to understand that time was information. 41 minutes meant the wound was serious enough to require sustained intervention, but not so catastrophic that intervention had given way to something else. 41 minutes meant Roman was still on the couch, and not in the back of an ambulance, which was either a good sign or a dangerous calculation, and she was not yet sure which. She stayed at his arm the entire time. Not in the way, not obstructing Yoon's work. She had positioned herself at his right side, away from the wound, and she kept her hand on his forearm and watched his face while Yoon worked on his left side, because his face was the most reliable data source available to her. His color, his breathing, the quality of his consciousness, which remained present throughout eyes open, tracking, occasionally tightening around the corners when Yoon hit something that cost him. He did not make much sound. She would learn later that this was characteristic of him, not performance, stoicism, for its own sake, but the product of years in environments where sound was a liability. His body had learned silence, the way other bodies learned other things. At the 38-minute mark, Yoon said, "The blade missed the kidney by approximately 2 centimeters. Nobody responded to that immediately. It nicked the muscle layer at the posterior wall," Yoon continued, with the flat precision of someone reading findings rather than delivering them. "There's significant bleeding from a small vessel that I've addressed. No organ perforation that I can identify in this setting, but he needs imaging to confirm." She looked up. "He needs a hospital." "No," Roman said. His voice was quieter than it had been in the car, but clearer, which meant either the pain was becoming manageable or he was working harder to sound like it was. "That wasn't a suggestion," Yoon said. "I heard it." "Roman." Yoon set down the instrument she was holding with a deliberateness that communicated something. "I can stabilize you here. I cannot treat you here. Sound like green-ing. The difference between those two things is the difference between recovery and a complication that becomes something I cannot manage in a living room." He looked at the ceiling. "Give me an hour," he said. "For what?" "There are things that need to happen in the next hour before I go anywhere." Yoon looked at Claire. Claire understood the look. It was the look medical professionals give each other when a patient has made a decision that is medically inadvisable, and the question being passed between them is whether anyone in this room has sufficient influence over the patient to override it. She looked at Roman. "1 hour," she said, "and then you go." He looked at her. 1 hour, he agreed. Yoon finished the stabilization in silence. She packed the wound, secured it, issued instructions to Grant, about monitoring in the tone of someone who understood Grant was not a medical professional, but was also clearly the most reliable person in the room for executing specific tasks reliably. She left a phone number and said she would return in 90 minutes, whether anyone called her or not. When she left, the apartment had the quality of a space that has been the site of a serious thing and is now in the interval after it quieter than before, rearranged by what happened in it. Grant went to the kitchen. Vivian sat in the chair across from the couch and looked at her brother with the look she had been wearing since the elevator, the look of someone who has run the worst version of this moment in their head so many times that the actual moment has a surreal quality, a slight displacement, as though reality is slightly offset from the position they had prepared for it to occupy. Roman turned his head and looked at her. "Tell me," he said. Vivian looked at her hands. "Grant took care of the pier," she said. "The 4 men Vincent had positioned on approach. She paused. "They're not a problem. The building position. Handled before you left. We told you. The rest of Vincent's people." Vivian was quiet for a moment. "Vincent's death creates a succession problem," she said. "He has a younger brother, Paolo, who has been managing the financial side of the Calderoni operation for 3 years. Paolo is not Vincent. Paolo has spent the last 3 years trying to reduce the organization's exposure, not expand it. The intelligence from our source inside suggests Paolo has been actively opposed to what Vincent was doing with you." She looked up. "Paolo reached out through an intermediary 2 hours ago." Roman said nothing. "He wants to talk," Vivian said. "Not to you directly. Through lawyers. He's proposing a formal separation. The Calderon organization withdraws all active operation against the Alderidge organization and its associates, permanent, documented, with legal structures that create consequences for violation." She paused. He's offering to supply the federal investigators with Vincent's operational records covering the last 4 years. Everything. The crash, the hospital compound, Halverson, Marcus's recruitment. Another pause. In exchange for a parallel cessation from our side. The room was quiet. Roman looked at the ceiling. He wants to be done, Roman said. He wants to be done, Vivian confirmed. He's been wanting to be done for 3 years. Vincent wouldn't allow it. Roman was quiet for a moment. Tell the lawyers yes, he said. Vivian looked at him. Roman, tell them yes, he said again, and tell them I want the federal package delivered to Carver directly, not through intermediaries. I want a name attached to it, Paolo Calderone, on the record cooperating. He paused. If he's willing to do that, then it's done. Vivian absorbed this. That's not how you've handled these situations before, she said carefully. No, Roman agreed. It isn't, he did not explain further. Vivian looked at him for a long moment, the look of a sister's man who managed her brother's life for 20 years and is watching him make a decision that is outside the pattern of every decision she has built her. Management of him around, and then she picked up her phone. Claire had been sitting on the far end of the couch, close enough to have heard everything, far enough to not be in the middle of it. She watched Vivian leave the room with the phone at her ear and watched Grant reappear briefly in the kitchen doorway to confirm something with a look before disappearing again. And then the room was just her and Roman and the afternoon light coming through the south windows at the low angle of a day that was running out. Roman turned his head toward her. You heard all of that, he said. Questions. Many, she said, later. He almost smiled. The same almost as before, the architecture of it present, the surface not quite there. There's something I need to do in the next hour, he said. Before Yoon comes back. What? I need to call Carver. Carver knows I need to call Carver about something specific. He paused. The breathing was still careful but steadier now that Yoon had addressed the vessel. I need to make a statement, a formal one, about the organization, about what it is and what it has been and what I intend to do with it. He turned his head to look directly at her. I've been thinking about it since the pier, in the car, while Yoon was working. Another pause. The truth is, I've been thinking about it since I woke up in that hospital room and understood what had been done to me. She looked at him. What does the statement say? She said. It says that I'm cooperating with the federal investigation into the Calderone organization and its intersection with my own. He held her gaze. It says that I'm providing full documentation of the criminal operations of the Alderidge organization over the last decade in exchange for an agreement regarding my own prosecution that my lawyers have been drafting since last week. The room was very quiet. Since last week, she said. Since 2 days after I woke up, she absorbed this. You've been planning this since you came back, she said. I've been considering it since I came back. He looked at the ceiling. 6 days of being conscious, inside a body that everyone believed was a corpse, does something to your perspective on what you've been doing with the time you were given before that. He paused. I couldn't get out of it while I was in it. There were too many people, depending on the structure, too many obligations I couldn't simply walk away from without consequences for people who hadn't made the same choices I had. I understood that. But I also understood, lying there, that I had been using those obligations as the reason for 20 years, and at some point the reason becomes the justification, and the justification becomes the identity. And I couldn't. He stopped. He turned his head toward her again. I heard you, he said, that night. You told me about your life, the shoes, your father, the coffee machine. And you weren't performing. You were just telling the truth, because there was nobody there to perform for. He looked at her steadily. I haven't lived like that for a very long time. I had forgotten it was an option. The afternoon light was doing something specific to the room, that particular late-day quality, that makes things look simultaneously more vivid and more temporary, as though the light is aware. It's running out. Claire looked at him. If you do this, she said carefully, what happens to the organization? The people in it. The criminal operations separate from the legitimate businesses. The people in the legitimate side keep their jobs, their positions. The criminal side, he paused. Some of those people will face consequences. I can't prevent that. What I can do is provide enough information about the Calderones that the investigative focus shifts significantly toward them, which is where the more serious violence has been. He looked at her. It won't be clean. Nothing about it will be clean. People I made commitments to will feel those commitments were broken. Some of them will be right, and you're doing it anyway. I'm doing it anyway. She looked at his face, at the pallor still sitting in it, at the scar above his eyebrow, at the specific quality of his eyes that she had first noticed in a hospital room at 1 in the morning when they had been closed, and she had talked to them anyway. Call Carver, she said. He called Carver. She listened to the call from the far end of the couch and heard Roman's voice move through the conversation with the specificity of someone who had prepared what he was going to say and was now saying it, not reading it, but delivering it in the way of a man who had spent 20 years communicating decisions to people and understood that the clarity of the delivery was part of the decision itself. He used the word cooperate. He used the word documentation. He used the word voluntary twice, with a precision that suggested his lawyers had told him that word mattered. Carver, on the other end, was quiet for longer than he usually was. When he spoke, what he said was, "I'll need this in writing within 24 hours. You'll have it within 12, Roman said. He ended the call. He lay with the phone on his chest and looked at the seal scene, and the expression on his face was not relief. It was something more complicated than relief. The expression of someone who has put down something heavy and is experiencing simultaneously the lightness of not carrying it and the strangeness of the absence. That's the first step, he said. Not to her, specifically. To the room. How many steps are there, she said. Enough, he said. A significant number. A pause. Years, probably. The legal architecture of dismantling. Something that took 20 years to build is not simple. My lawyers have a process. The federal agreement has terms. There will be periods where I'm not sure it will hold, and periods where it does. But you're committed to it. He turned his head. I'm committed to it, he said. She nodded once. She stood up. You're going to the hospital now, she said. Yoon isn't Roman. She said his name with the same precision Vivian used it, and she watched something in his face respond to it. Not submission, but recognition. The recognition of his name in someone's mouth as a thing that carries weight rather than just identification. You have a wound that nicked a vessel 2 centimeters from your kidney. You have been horizontal on a couch for an hour, following a physical confrontation while already 2 weeks out from pharmacological coma, and you have just made a phone call that your body did not have the resources to spare for. She looked at him steadily. You are going to the hospital. You are going to get imaging. And you are going to do this because you just committed to a significant number of steps that require you to be alive and functional to complete them. He looked at her. That's a practical argument, he said. It's the only kind I have right now. He called Grant. They took him to Meridian, which was the specific irony of returning to the building, where 12 days ago, someone had tried to finish killing him. The admitting process was different. This time, Vivian had called ahead. Yoon had faxed preliminary notes, and there was a suite waiting on a different floor from the 42nd, a floor where the security detail that Carver had arranged was already positioned. Claire came with him. Nobody asked her whether she was coming. She simply came, and nobody indicated. This was unexpected, which told her something about how quickly the last 3 days had rearranged the way the people around Roman related to her presence. The imaging took 90 minutes. The results confirmed what Yoon had found and what Roman had privately known as significant muscle damage, the nicked vessel addressed, but requiring monitoring, no organ perforation. The attending physician used the word fortunate, twice in a way that suggested he was understating something considerably. Roman was admitted. The room was not the 42nd floor, but it had the same south-facing window, and in the early evening light, with the city doing its insomniac thing below, it had the same quality as the room where all of this had started, that specific hospital quiet that is not peaceful, but is a kind of stillness. The stillness of a place outside of time where normal life is suspended and things are permitted to be only what they are. Claire sat in the chair beside the bed. Roman looked at her. This is where we started, he said. Different floor, she said. Same chair position. She looked at the chair. He was right. Are you going to talk to me all night? There was something in his voice that was new, not lighter exactly, but different from the controlled precision he usually operated with. Something that had been there underneath it and was now, in the specific exhaustion and chemical aftermath of surgery prep, and the sustained physical and psychological effort of the last 4 days, closer to the surface. Probably not all night, she said. You actually need to sleep this time. Last time I slept, someone tried to inject potassium chloride into my IV. Last time you slept, I was watching, she said. Same applies. He was quiet for a moment, Claire. Yes. What happens after this, he said, not anxiously, with the genuine curiosity of someone who has dismantled the structure around which they organized their life, and is now looking at the cleared ground with something between apprehension and relief. She looked at him. You recover, she said, properly this time. Not 40 minutes on a couch. And then your lawyers do what lawyers do. And Carver does what Carver does. And Paulo Calderone delivers what he agreed to deliver. She paused. And you figure out what the legitimate businesses look like when they're not functioning as cover for the other things. That part I know how to do, he said. The businesses were always real. The shipping is real. The construction is real. I was a businessman who made choices about what else to be. He paused. I can unmake the choices, can you, she said. Not challenging. An actual question. He considered it. Not perfectly, he said. I can't unwind 20 years in a legal document. There are things I've done that documentation doesn't touch. People who were harmed by decisions I made. He looked at the ceiling. I'm not telling you it becomes clean. I'm telling you it stops getting dirtier. She absorbed that. It stops getting dirtier, she said. That's the honest version. She looked at him. The honest version, she said, is the one I need. Something shifted in his face. I know, he said. I think I've known that since a hospital room at 1 a.m. 3 weeks after Roman was admitted, for the second time, Claire returned to Meridian Private Hospital as a working nurse, not the 42nd floor. She had requested a different rotation, which the charge nurse had processed without comment, either because she didn't know anything or because she knew everything, and had decided that the details were outside her professional scope. Phyllis, who knew everything about everyone on staff and had the specific wisdom of a woman who had been a charge nurse for 22 years, simply handed Claire the first chart of the night shift and said, "Welcome back." The work was the same. The 4th floor had the same linoleum, the same soft beeping, the same particular quality of nighttime in a hospital where the world outside had dimmed but the building had not. She did her rounds. She charted vitals. A sound like green wood splitting. She talked to a 71-year-old man named George who couldn't sleep and wanted to discuss baseball, and she told him she'd find out if the Knicks had won, which made him laugh in the way people laugh when a nurse gets something gently wrong. She was good at this work. She had always been good at it. She was a better nurse than the financial circumstances of the last 2 years had given her space to remember. And the return to the floor had the specific quality of returning to something true about herself, not the desperate night shift, arithmetic of overtime and debt management and exhaustion, but the actual core of it, the part that had made her choose this in the first place before choosing it became its own kind of trap. She went home at 7 a.m. Roman's apartment in the West Village, which had been his and was now also hers in the gradual and unremarked way that spaces become shared when two people stop pretending they're operating in separate orbits. She had not moved in formally. There had been no conversation with the specific content of moving in. Her sneakers were next to his expensive shoes by the door, and her coffee mug was on the second shelf, and her books had been filling the spaces between his books for 3 weeks, and the territory between formally and actually had dissolved at some point without announcement. He was awake when she came home. He was always awake before her. Now the recovery had changed his sleep patterns, or maybe the 20 years before the recovery had changed them, and the 6 days of pharmacological suspension had simply made the change visible. But he slept in 4-hour intervals and was reliably awake by 6, regardless of when he'd gone to sleep. Was at the kitchen table with coffee and documents when she came through the door, and he looked up with the specific quality of attention he gave things. When they entered a room full, without the partial register awareness that most people used. Good shift, she said. It was not a question. It was a statement of how she was carrying herself. George, she said, baseball. He's 71 and has opinions about the designated hitter rule. And I told him I'd find out about the Knicks. Roman looked at her. That's a different sport, he said. He laughed. She dropped her bag by the door. How are you? Better than yesterday. That's not specific enough. The wound site is less uncomfortable than it was. At this time yesterday morning, he said. My range of motion on the left side is approximately 70%. I walked 6 blocks this morning instead of 4. You walked 6 blocks before 7 in the morning. I couldn't sleep after 4. She went to the coffee maker and poured a cup and stood at the counter and looked at him across the kitchen. He was in a gray t-shirt and the particular state of early morning that people only show in spaces they feel safe in, not unkempt, not diminished, just unperforming, just himself. She thought, not for the first time, that this was the version of him she had met first, before she knew what he was, before anyone told her what she was supposed to be looking at. She had met this version in a hospital room at 1 in the morning when all the other were unavailable. And she had talked to him honestly, and he had heard her, and the thing that had grown from that specific starting point was something she had no clean category for, but recognized as real, in the way she recognized the difference between a patient who was breathing and a patient who was beginning to breathe for themselves. She recognized it as the real thing. Carver called that afternoon. He called Roman's phone, and Roman put it on speaker on the kitchen table, which was how their conversations worked now, not because Roman had decided to include her, but because he had stopped operating in compartments where she wasn't present, and the not to see was itself a decision. The federal agreement was finalized. The language Carver used was careful and procedural and moved quickly through the parts that were administrative before reaching the parts that mattered, which were these. The documentation Roman had provided covered 12 years of organized criminal activity, implicated 43 individuals across 3 organizations, including the Calderon operation, and had been received by the federal investigators as substantively complete in a way that rarely occurred with voluntary cooperation. Paolo Calderoni's package had arrived 3 days ago and was, in Carver's word, extensive. The terms of Roman's agreement required a formal guilty plea to 2 charges selected from the documentation in a way that his lawyers had negotiated with precision, and a suspended sentence contingent on sustained cooperation and compliance. No prison, monitored significant financial penalties, ongoing obligations to the investigation for a period of 3 years. Roman listened to all of it without speaking. When Carver finished, Roman said the 2 charges. Racketeering, 1 count. Criminal conspiracy, 1 count. A pause. Tell the prosecutor I accept, Roman said. Carver was quiet for a moment. I'll relay that, he said. Roman. He paused in the way he paused when he was about to say something outside his professional register. I've been doing this for 23 years. This doesn't happen this way. I know, Roman said. I mean that as Carver seemed to decide something. Take care of yourself. Working on it, Roman said. He ended the call. The kitchen was quiet. Claire looked at him across the table. 2 charges, she said. 2 charges, he confirmed. My lawyers worked for a week on the selection. There were many to choose from. He said it without self-pity, without the need for her to respond to it in any particular way. Just the plain statement of a true thing. She looked at him. Okay, she said. He looked at her. That's your response, he said. What response did you expect? I don't know, he said honestly. Something more, Roman. She set her coffee down. You pled guilty to 2 federal charges this afternoon. That's significant. It's real. I'm not going to minimize it. She held his gaze. And it's also the first step out of something that would have ended with you dead on a pier in Gowanus, or back in a hospital bed with someone trying to inject your IV. She paused. Both of those things are true at the same time. You're allowed to let them both be true. He looked at the table. Then he looked at her. I'm not sure I know how to do that, he said. I know, she said. You'll figure it out. The weeks that followed had a texture that neither of them had the right words for immediately, but that both of them recognized as something they had not had before, ordinary things. Roman's recovery continued in the way recoveries continue when a person stops fighting them gradually, imperfectly, with setbacks that required adjustment and adjustments that required patience, and patience that was, for Roman specifically, a skill he was building from incomplete raw material. He had been a man who operated at full capacity or not at all, and the interval between those 2 states was unfamiliar territory. He did not navigate it gracefully. There were days when his frustration at his own limitations expressed itself as silence that filled a room weather, and days when the silence broke into something sharper and directed at the nearest available person, which was usually Claire. She did not manage him the way Vivian managed him. She did not absorb the sharpness or redirect it or give him space from it. She gave it back. Not cruelly, not with the intention of escalating it, a sound like green wood splitting, but with the directness of someone who had decided at some point in the last month that the version of him she had committed to was not the version that needed management. and who intended to keep saying so. They argued occasionally about things that were partly about the surface issue and partly about the larger thing underneath the adjustment, the change, the specific difficulty of becoming a different version of yourself after 20 years, of being certain about who you were. He was not easy. She had not expected easy. She had not wanted easy. She had wanted real, and real was what she had. Her parents came to dinner in the 5th week. A Soundler walked into the West Village apartment and looked at everything with the thorough and unapologetic assessment that she had always applied to every environment her daughter occupied, and said nothing. For the first 3 minutes, which was long enough that Roman, who was in the kitchen, managing the end of a meal he had cooked, because he had informed Claire 2 weeks ago that he cooked, and she had informed him that she did not, and they had arrived at an arrangement, looked at Claire with an expression that asked whether the silence was positive or negative. Claire made a gesture that meant, wait. Her mother sat down at the kitchen table. She looked at Roman, who had come out of the kitchen to meet her, and conducted the specific assessment that her mother conducted of every significant person in her daughter's life, prolonged, transparent, entirely without social pretense. Roman held it without looking away, which Claire suspected was the right answer, even if he didn't know why. Her mother said, "You cooked." "Yes," Roman said. "What did you make?" "Braised short ribs, rice, roasted carrots." Her mother looked at the table. "Claire doesn't cook," she said. "I'm aware," Roman said. "She never learned," her mother said. "I tried. She's very good at other things," Roman said. Her mother looked at him. Then she looked at Claire. Then she sat down and unfolded her napkin, which was the specific gesture that, in Claire's mother's language, meant the evaluation was complete, and the result was satisfactory. Her father was having a clear day. They happened less frequently. Now the kidney disease had a progression that was what it was, and the treatments managed what they could manage, and some days were clearer than others. This one was clear enough that he talked about baseball for 20 minutes and asked Roman pointed questions about his opinions on designated hitters and free agency, and Roman answered with the specificity of someone who had either done rapid research or actually knew things about baseball, and either way the effect was the same. Her father liked him. Her mother had decided she could work with him. After dinner, her mother found Claire in the kitchen while Roman and her father finished talking in the living room. Her mother did not ask how she was or say anything leading. She looked at the kitchen and looked at the coffee mug on the second shelf and looked at the sneakers by the door, which were visible from the kitchen angle. "He's not simple," her mother said. "No," Claire said. "Neither are you." "I know." Her mother looked at her. "Are you happy?" Claire thought about the question, not performing thinking about it, but actually taking the moment to locate the honest answer and inspect it before delivering it. "Not always," she said. "Not in the way that's easy. But yes." Her mother nodded once. She picked up her coffee cup. "That's the right kind," she said, and that was all she said about it. The foundation took shape over the following months in the way that things take shape when the person building them is being careful, and has learned something about the cost of building things without thinking about what they'll require to maintain. Claire's idea, originally a way to use the financial settlement from the federal agreement, the portion that Roman's lawyers had structured as going towards something documentable and public rather than simply into penalties, toward families navigating long-term medical costs without the resources to absorb them. The specific thing she knew about. The specific gap that had shaped the last 3 years of her life before a rainy night and a hospital suite on the 42nd floor. Roman hired the right people to make it real. She guided the shape of what it should do, not the legal or financial architecture, but the actual substance, the what it, which she understood better than any lawyer or administrator could have, because she had been the person it was for. It was not clean. The process of establishing it involved negotiations and legal filings, and a period in which it was unclear whether the federal agreement's terms would permit the financial structure they needed, and a period in which it became clear. But the tax implications were different from what had been projected, a sound like green wood splitting, and a period in which the first family they helped had a complication that the foundation's initial framework hadn't accounted for, and they had to revise the framework. It was not clean, and it was not fast, and it was not the version of the story where things resolve into obvious goodness. But it became real. 6 months after the pier, Roman stood on the rooftop of the West Village building, On an evening in late October, when the city below had a specific quality cooler, the light lower, the streets with the particular energy of a city entering a season, Claire was beside him. He reached into the pocket of his jacket and took out a ring white gold, simple, a ring that she would learn, later, had belonged to his mother, which made the simplicity of it mean something more specific than simplicity alone. He held it in his palm and looked at it, and then looked at her. He was not a man who made speeches. She knew that about him. She had known it since a hospital room where his first words to her had been about her father's kidneys and her shoes, and his conversation since then had operated in the same mode precise, without excess, saying the thing and not the version of the thing that was designed to perform feeling. I had 2 lives, he said. The first one I built out of the wrong materials. I knew they were wrong and I built it anyway because I had convinced myself there wasn't a different option. He paused. He looked at the ring in his palm. The second one started in a hospital room where someone sat beside me all night and told me the truth about her life when she thought I couldn't hear her. He looked up. I heard her. Claire looked at him. I don't know whether you were the reason I came back, he said. I've thought about that question more times than I can count. I don't know the answer. He paused. But I know you're the reason I want to stay. He held out the ring. She looked at it. She looked at his face, at the scar above his eyebrow that she had pressed her lips to on a night when she didn't know if she would see him again, at the specific quality of his eyes that she had first catalogued in the dark when they were closed. And she had decided, on no evidence that would have satisfied anyone, that they were not yet gone. She took the ring. Yes, she said. He exhaled. It was a small sound, almost nothing, but she heard it. They married in the spring in a small chapel in the Hudson Valley, where the trees were just beginning to do what trees do in April, tentatively, incrementally, with no drama. The guest list was short enough to fit in a room that did not require a microphone, which was the point. Vivian stood beside Roman. Grant sat in the 3rd row on the right side, in the only dark suit Claire had ever seen him in, and he sat with the particular stillness of a man who had decided that what was happening in front of him deserved his full attention. Claire's mother cried. She had told Claire she would not cry, and she cried anyway, which was something Claire had expected and had chosen not to predict aloud, because some things are better allowed to arrive as themselves. Her father was having a difficult day. The disease did not pause for weddings. The progression was what it was, and the morning had been hard, and there had been a point 2 hours before the ceremony when Claire had been in the back room with him while he struggled with where he was and why and who the people outside the door were, and she had sat with him in that the way she sat with hospital patients, patient, not asking the moment to be different than it was. Then, near the beginning of the ceremony, something shifted. It happened the way clarity happened, on the good days, without announcement, without a specific cause she could identify. Her father's face changed. The confusion behind his eyes resolved for a moment into recognition, the way a channel clears, and he looked at her. He looked at her in her dress, at the small cluster of people, at Roman standing at the front of the chapel, and he understood what he was seeing. He looked at her. There she is, he said quietly. Her mother took his hand. Claire looked at him from where she stood, and the moment had the specific quality of a gift that you understand immediately is not glass, that it is the moment itself, complete, and you receive it as it is rather than asking it to be larger. She walked down the aisle. Roman's vow was short. He had told her he would keep it short, and she had told him she did not need long. And he had said, I owned half a city and didn't own a morning. She gave me one. I'm giving her the rest. That was all. That was everything. The years after did not unfold simply. The legal obligations continued for the agreed 3 years and were completed. The legitimate businesses required sustained attention to restructure without the infrastructure that had supported them through less legitimate means, and there were quarters that were difficult and quarters that were less difficult. Roman was not a man who had become simple by becoming better. He was still the man who filled a room with his silence when he was frustrated and who made decisions at a pace that occasionally left people scrambling, and who had, at his core, the specific kind of confidence that comes from having survived things, and sometimes expressed itself as an assumption that his read on situations was correct when it was only likely. He was still difficult. She was still direct. They argued about things that mattered and things that didn't, and the arguments that mattered were real arguments, not performances of conflict, but the actual friction of two people with fully formed selves occupying the same space and caring about the outcome. The foundation grew. It was real and imperfect, and required her to learn things she hadn't known about nonprofit structures and grant cycles, and the specific politics of healthcare advocacy, and she learned them. She hired people who knew what she didn't, and learned from them and retained the authority over the shape and purpose of the work, because that was the part she had come from. She still worked shifts at Meridian, reduced now, but regular. She had not wanted to stop entirely, and Roman had not suggested she should, because he had understood since a hospital room at 1 a.m. that the work was not separate from who she was, but was one of the primary sites of who she was, and you did not ask someone to vacate a primary site of themselves. George, on the 4th floor, had recovered and gone home. Phyllis had retired in February and then come back in March because retirement had not suited her, which Phyllis had predicted and everyone else had known without saying. One night in the winter late, snow coming down over the city, the specific silence that snow brings to New York, which is the only kind of quiet the city offers. Voluntarily, Claire stood at the window of the home she shared with Roman and looked down at the streets. A bus moved between the buildings. She watched it go. She thought about the woman she had been 3 years ago, standing in the rain outside Meridian with a cracked phone screen, doing the arithmetic of which overtime shifts would cover which expense, too tired to dream about anything except getting through the night. That woman had not been broken. She wanted to be clear about that in her own accounting. She had not been waiting to be saved. She had been doing what she did, which was showing up, which was the thing she had always done and would keep doing regardless of what changed around it. She had shown up to a hospital suite on the 42nd floor. She had shown up for a man whose chart said he was already gone. She had made a judgment call based on evidence that was thin, an instinct that was not thin at all. And she had been right, and being right had cost her things, and given her things, and rearranged the shape of her life in ways she could not have predicted from any position she had occupied before that night. Roman came up behind her. He put his arms around her waist. She leaned back slightly. "You're awake," he said. "I'm awake." He looked out the window over her shoulder at the snow coming down. "What are you looking at?" he said. She watched another bus disappear between the buildings, its light soft and diffuse in the snow. "The difference," she said. He held her. Outside, Manhattan continued. Once, everyone in a hospital room on the 42nd floor had looked at a man in a bed and seen what the chart told them to see. Claire had looked closer. She had reached across the bed rail in the middle of the night when there was no reason to, and every reason not to, and she had taken his hand, and she had told him the true things about her life because he was the only one there. And she was too tired for anything else, and she had said the simplest thing available, "You're not gone yet." He had come back, and in helping him find his way back to life, in choosing, every time the choice was available, to stay rather than to leave, to look closer rather than accept the official version, to say the true thing rather than the easier one, Claire Whitmore had found her way into a life that was hers. Not the life she had planned, not the life she had been surviving toward, the real one. The one that started when she took his hand.